Supervisors, welcome, and please take your seats. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Roll call of supervisors, please. I am only aware by virtue of looking over that Supervisor Grulich is not with us, so we should have 27 in attendance. First order of business this evening is citizen comments. Citizen comments are limited to 5 minutes. You'll have 5 minutes to address the board. I'd ask you to state your name and address. Speak loudly and clearly into the microphone, please.
Good evening. My name is Mark Nicholas, and I work for Kenosha County. I do, however, live in Racine County, so I'm going to ask permission to speak.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to urge the board to pass the budget as it was presented, specifically as it pertains to the insurance package that was offered by the personnel. It's my understanding that there may be a proposal that would require county employees to pay a portion of the premium, and I suspect that the rationale for that will likely be that it's necessary to ensure balance, equity, and fairness when compared to the private sector. However, I believe that argument is conveniently missing one key point. Because of all the activity recently in both Ohio and Wisconsin, the federal government actually has taken an interest in this issue as well. And the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics did their own study, and they found some interesting findings. What they did was they tried to separate out both wages and benefits. And what they found was that when it came to benefits, not surprisingly, public sector employees did better. However, when they looked at just wages, it was the private sector that did much better. When they looked at total compensation, it was virtually identical. There was a very minimal, negligible difference, and actually public sector employees did worse. So if you are looking for fairness, if you are looking for balance, if you are looking for equity, you're already there. You're already there. The only thing I can think of, then, is that this is just punitive. And public sector employees are not the bad guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Anyone else wishing to address the board? I'm going to ask this evening because I trust we'll hear a great deal of what we heard last night. That's a statement of fact, not a judgment in any way. If you want to speak, I'm going to ask you to queue up. We have a lengthy agenda, and I'd like your cooperation, please. Go ahead.
Mike Splinsky, 1415 97th Avenue, Kenosha. I don't know all the details within the budget. I know that overall the levy is being asked to increase 1.8%. I know last year my property taxes overall went up about 45%. Now again, here comes government back asking the private sector to dip back into it. Seems like a bottomless well. There's many things that we in the private sector have been asked to cut back on, and personally within my family certainly have had to, whether my wages not being increased or increases in things that I personally have had to pay for. Now with regard, a great point was just brought up, and it has to do with health insurance. Between contributions, co-pays, and deductibles, I personally pay for myself and my family over $5,600 a year. In addition, I as a private citizen am being asked to pay for all the health care benefits. In this case, strictly, let's talk about the county. If it's fair, so fair and equitable, why am I having to pay not only for myself and my own family, but for other people's family? And if it's so bad that it's so unfair within public sector to ask them to start sharing the same burden that we have had to share within the private sector, there is an alternative. You can quit if it's that bad. I don't think we citizens, we taxpayers, because all of us in this room, first and foremost, are taxpayers, are asking too much in the economy that we currently have, with the high unemployment rate, with the lack of economic growth and development, to ask government, our elected officials that are supposed to be representing the taxpayers' interests, to dig a little deeper, to become a little bit more creative, to ask the administration, gee, where are there some cuts that we could be making so that I don't have to continue to dole out more and more and more? And we all know property taxes within Wisconsin are at a ridiculous level when you start comparing them to other states. And the arguments, oh, this is so much better and you get so much of this and so much of that. Sorry, the things that I do personally experience, such as the condition of the roads, are terrible. So clearly we're not spending as much money as we do give as taxpayers wisely. So I would ask you to reevaluate this budget. And if nothing else, hold it at a zero income or a zero increase overall. But certainly, one place you can certainly start is with insurance benefits for county workers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
Thank you, sir. Jack Rose, 4315 68th Street. I've been here before, and I will continue to return. I think you all know what I've said in the past. We need to really take care of the people that are affected with mental illness here in Kenosha County. We can do so by supporting the Human Services budget as it has been forwarded. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Any other citizen comments? Any other citizen comments? Citizen comments are closed. Announcements of the chairman. I'm going to move this agenda around a little bit this evening. Resolution 65, which is new business, I believe needs to be in front of the agenda. I'm sorry, ahead of the budget, because the budget, a decision on Resolution 65, which is the waste management contract, directly impacts the budget. So I'm going to ask that that be moved up. We'll take 65 first. We'll go back to the budget, and then we'll address 66 following that. Also, if you are not aware because you didn't have access to email or weren't notified, we will be holding a closed session this evening at the end of our meeting to address a late afternoon call from the city's attorney relative to redistricting. That's part of the most cordial way I can put that. So we will go into closed session to hear from Corporation Counsel and provide some dialogue and feedback amongst the group. Let's talk for a moment about the budget. If you're concerned about the time this evening, as you know, I'm going to give everyone ample time to talk. We'll come back. If we need to continue to debate an issue, we'll continue to debate an issue. So I'm going to ask that we're respectful of those who want to talk. If you don't happen to be one of them, I'm going to ask you to sit and listen attentively. I'm not inclined to entertain motions to close debate in any way. Obviously, they can certainly be posed to the board floor. I need to have the opportunity and afford everyone the opportunity to discuss the issue as long as that may take. And I do recognize we've got a closed session to discuss as well this evening. Certainly, I want to stay on point. We have heard over and over again the statements about how we make the decisions we make. I can say, and I've said this before on the board floor, I have yet to hear any supervisor, whether we agree or disagree, whether we talk or don't talk from time to time, attack a group or individual county employee. And no one has ever said we're going to take advantage of this one, or pile on to this group or that group. I anticipate we won't hear that again this evening. And I want to make sure that we all understand that those are not decisions or discussions that come into our decision making at all. And I think it's somewhat unfortunate that we need to have that thrown at us repeatedly. Before we get into it, I think it's probably the appropriate time rather than at the end of it. I want to recognize those certainly who have put the effort forth. And that doesn't discount this entire county board and those who attended the budget hearings on a regular basis, those who attended their committee meetings, which we all did, and certainly were part of that and actively part of that discussion and that debate. It's a process that every year I tend to get a little bit amped up for and excited about because it is a significant part of what we do and sets the stage for the entire year going forward. The county executive, I think there was a time when he took an awful lot of credit as the assistant to the county executive way back when. So certainly I want to make sure I give his assistant the credit that I'm sure she deserves for all the effort that she puts in this time of year as well. But Jim and Jenny and the administration, the department heads, division heads, and all of their efforts to put this budget together, certainly agree or disagree with it. It is a time-consuming, a significant proposition, and I respect the effort that they all put into it. And that is, not to discount, well, I want to specifically address Mr. Gertzen and Mr. Swartz, who I think y'all made the statement earlier this year that this is what he lives for. And if there is any question that these two gentlemen take their job seriously, then you, in my opinion, haven't really gotten involved in the process. Again, good, better, and different at the end of the day. I believe these two are very good at what they do. I believe they are very diligent at what they do. And there's a rare time, if any, that I don't take their word as it's provided to me. So I appreciate Mr. Gertzen, Mr. Schwartz, all that you do every year. I've been a part of a few of these now. And it's comforting to know that the two of you are there and you're going to put the effort in to work with all involved year over year. In our Finance Committee, we made some changes this year with the restructuring of the county board. I want to specifically recognize Supervisor Grady and Supervisor Rose, two gentlemen who were supervisors who were chairman of committees at the time. I asked them to forego the chairmanship to be a part of the Finance Committee as we expanded the numbers on the committees. Maybe somewhat reluctantly, maybe not. Both agreed to do it. And, of course, as one would expect, they jumped into it fully and embraced the effort. And I applaud both of you and appreciate all that you've done to help make the restructuring work the way it did. Again, I mentioned the entire county board. There was a significant amount of debate during the budget process, whether it be at committee or at the full Finance Committee meeting. That is exactly how it's supposed to work. Clearly, you recognize that Supervisor Clark will be the last individual that I mentioned with regard to the budget. There's nothing that needs to be said about Joe's tenacity, his willingness to spend countless hours looking up, researching, understanding the facts before he speaks and before he brings a proposal forward. This was an opportunity for Supervisor Clark to clearly say, you know what, I announced a long time ago I'm not running again. So I'll go through the motions, I'll do what I have to do, the budget will come forward, and we'll leave it to the rest. That isn't his style, never has been. And clearly, as he has done in the past, he embraced the responsibility of the Finance Committee, the budget hearings in particular, this end of October and November. I trust you will hear a significant amount of backup as to some of the decisions that were made and the proposals that will come forward, no doubt, this evening. Joe, I thank you, as always, for all that you've done and continue to do for the county board. I'm going to say it, I'm sure, before this is all said and done, it'll be a great loss for Kenosha County when you're done and when you finally hang up your political hat, as it were. And I appreciate all that you've done, certainly this budget, and look forward to a significant amount of good, not necessarily cordial, but good debate this evening. With that, Clerk, I will ask you to read New Business Resolution 65. Right after we do supervisor reports. Any supervisor reports? Supervisor Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make it really brief. I just want to thank the Kenosha News today in their early morning paper. They had a nice article in between the judge and city and the county have a week to settle the redistricting suit, and the Saturday bus services are limited. They had a nice article about the Cub Scouts Pack 512 out of St. Mary's that did an excellent job on Saturday, and they cleaned up the church they raked it for leaves and things like that, and I was happy to see that, and especially because my son was pictured on the front page, and it was a nice thing, and I just want to thank the Kenosha News.
Truth comes out eventually, doesn't it? Congratulations to the Boy Scouts and your son in particular. Any other supervisor reports? Seeing none, Clerk.
New business, Resolution 65 from Finance Administration Committee, a resolution to modify prior agreements between Kenosha County and Waste Management. Clark, yes. O'Day, yes. Jeff Kents, yes. Eckerness, yes. Rose, yes. Singer, yes. Grady, yes.
Supervisor Clark.
I move Resolution 65.
Resolution 65, moved by Supervisor Clark, seconded by Supervisor O'Day. Supervisor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many of you recall, the state of Wisconsin modified their budget several years back, adjusting the tipping fees for waste management. As a result, since 2008, they accepted 794,000 tons. In 2010, they accepted 189,000 tons of material. That's a substantial decrease. Any business that sustains that sort of hit needs to cut their cost or go out of business. Waste Management has approached Paris and Kenosha County to renegotiate their agreement. In the committee, it was very clear that the negotiators for Paris and Kenosha County, when they did this deal, struck a very sweet deal because I believe they were paying roughly $6 or $7 a ton in local cost. And I believe the average they were paying maybe $2.50. And I think this modification brings us down to about $4, between $3 and $4 a ton. They've come to Kenosha County and have said, while our chips are down, we're asking you in the town of Paris to give back. However, should our fortunes turn around when and there's provisions in there, when their tonnage gets up to certain levels between 400 and 500,000 tons, the amount goes up. When the tonnage goes up to 500 to 600, the annual donation goes up. And when it gets over 600 tons, we go back to the deal as it was. So we're making a modification in this deal with Waste Management to accept less. However, it keeps them here. It keeps their employees here. There are substantial savings to the county. They pick up in almost all of they pick up all their trash and waste for nothing. They have 2 pickups during the year for I can't think of the right term, but say it again. Hazardous materials. They're going to reduce that to one time a year, and they're going to charge us for the joint services and I believe the human services facilities. So this is a move that's necessitated by the economy, necessitated by the actions of the state that drove their business model down to nothing, and hopefully it turns around for them in the future. I urge your support.
Thank you. Supervisor Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Corporation Council, is there an opportunity to reevaluate the agreement if and when Illinois decides to raise their tipping fees, or if our legislators in Madison have a change of heart and do what's right?
If the law changes, I would assume that their tonnage would go up, and then when it hits that threshold of 600,000, the original agreement would kick back in.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other supervisor comments? Seeing none. All those. Supervisor Girbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I look at this resolution, it seems to me that the trash isn't coming to Kenosha County anymore because our tipping fees are roughly competitive with Illinois and other areas, and that this business model is such that the tonnage that's coming into the dump is not there because there's no reason for them to bring it here because they're not getting a lower rate. It's not that the trash isn't there. It's just that it's not coming here because it's cheaper to keep it someplace closer to home. I'm not inclined to support this because I don't feel that I want Kenosha County to be a dumping ground for other people's garbage, and that we're going to be artificially subsidizing somebody else's business model by lowering the tipping fee, by giving back out of our till. If tipping fees go up in Illinois, then the business model is that they're going to bring the garbage up here to Kenosha because it's cheaper. So I'm not in favor of this resolution. I don't think it's the right thing to do, and therefore won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Supervisor Rose.
Well, just to respond to that comment, and I think it needs to be responded to because there would be no reason for Waste Management to continue that operation at all if we stick to the old agreement at the higher rate, because they would be paying us more. They're going to be paying the state of Wisconsin more. I assume that Paris would probably act accordingly, but even if they didn't, there would be no reason to stay here. Now, if you want to encourage their closure, then certainly vote against this proposition before you this evening. But if you want to recognize that it is positive to have them in the community, it seems to me then you have to support the resolution.
Thank you. Any other comments? Supervisor Singer.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Supervisor Rose. It is good business to have in here. The city of Kenosha dumps their garbage here. We have to have a place to do it. If a negative action tonight forces them to close the facility, then the city of Kenosha may end up paying more for their disposal at another facility. I think it's reasonable given the time frame and the economy. It also has the reclaim part, whereas if the volume does go back up, our original agreement's still in place then. So it saves revenue for Paris. It saves revenue for the county. Yeah, we're going to lose some revenue that we were getting before, but the other side of the coin is not having any revenue. So I think we need to support this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution number 6, roll call requested. In favor of resolution 65, which is modification of the waste management contract, you vote P and plus, you oppose P and minus. One more. Motion carries 26-1.
Old business, policy resolution, second reading to required. Number 3 from the Finance Administration Committee regarding 2012 Kenosha County budget.
Supervisor Clark.
If we could just back up, I thought we were going to address item number 66 next.
No.
I guess before we would move that, I would ask that, I don't know if it's out of order, but I would, if we could be so kind to Mr. Wagner from Harrigan's to adopt that. Is there a problem with the order of this Corporation Council?
Well, the reason I didn't, and if you can address this adequately, I will go along with it, much as I'd love to see him stick around tonight. If it is in any way tied to the budget, 2012 budget, I would ask that it be held over, which is the exact opposite of why I took 65 first.
I think we can get the any information we need from Mr. Wagner if any of the capital items in the budget changes. Potentially, we can modify the dollar amount of the offering.
Tell you what, if you'd like to have the discussion and hold the vote, I'm open to that.
I just I know it's going to be a long evening, respecting Mr. Wagner and his time.
Agreed.
I would.
Mr. Gertson, if you want to address this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one comment I could make is the amount that you're adopting is a not to exceed, and if you adjust something in the budget, then we couldn't spend that amount until you would approve that amount in the budget.
All right,
So
fair
I'll
enough.
provide that.
Then I will ask the clerk to read 66 unless there's objection from the board. Seeing none, clerk.
Resolution 66 from Finance Administration Committee, an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation promissory notes in an amount not to exceed $8,651,259 for budgeted capital projects in Kenosha Area Business Alliance Grant. Clark, yes. O'Day, yes. Jeff Gens, yes. Eckerness, yes. Rose, yes. Singer, yes. Grady, yes.
Supervisor Clark.
I move Resolution 66.
Resolution 66, moved by Supervisor Clark, seconded by Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Clark.
Resolution 66 is part of our budget process wherein we, as a county board, authorize the initial resolution to authorize the issuance of promissory notes or bonds as needed, issue debt. As Mr. Gerston said, we're going to determine within our budget our capital project and our sources of funds to pay for those projects. We have a pre-sale report from Ellers here. A couple points that I want to make, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Wagner to step forward, and if there's anything he wants to address or the county board has any questions. There was the total notes in the 2012 budget, I believe is $12,740, and there's bonds of $2,810,000. When we adopted last year's budget, we had some projects that were going to carry over 2 years, and we initially approved that debt issue. Although we didn't issue the notes for them or the bonds for them, we initially approved them because we were making a commitment to a longer-term project, and we wanted to make sure that the funding was going to be there. So we had $2,810,000 of bonds that we previously authorized the issuance of for the courthouse project and the Molinaro building restoration, $900,000 for the black fiber project that we did $900 last year. We're doing the second half this year, and there was another resolution. I don't know exactly what it was for. It was 3.188. That might have been the road project that we were committing to. So if you take the $12,740,000, subtract out what we previously authorized, that's how we're getting to this $8,651,259. So that's how we get to the number. Previously, I made a statement relative to we're getting to our debt limit. Kenosha County has a debt policy that is substantially lower than what the state is. The state allows, I believe, all of the debt in Kenosha County, not just Kenosha County, to be at 5% of the equalized value. Kenosha County adopted a more restrictive policy of 0.7%. As equalized values have decreased, our outstanding debt amount that we can have outstanding has decreased. On page 5 of the report, there's a light blue line on there that says amount of additional projects to stay within the 0.70 target. So in 2013, we roughly have $1.5 million of availability based on our capital budget that we have in place right now. 2014, 3.1 million. 2015, 7.4 million. I just point this out because tonight, as we adopt the budget and we consider projects and various different things, there are some big things that are out looming. One of them that comes to mind is this whole joint services project and how does that impact us. Another item that the sheriff backed away from was the mobile command unit this year, and he's going to put that wants to put that into the 2013 budget. So I just want to point your attention to that. The county has a very strong rating, and the plan that's here is within the county board policies that we adopted. So with that, Mr. Wagner, is there anything else that you would like to add? Specifically, I don't know what we budgeted the rate to be in this analysis.
Thank you, Supervisor Clark, and I thank the board for their indulgence in the timing. It was not requested, but nonetheless very much appreciated. In terms of the interest rate estimate, the interest rates that are estimated for the 2012 borrowing are estimated at 1 full % above current market rates, not because we know interest rates are going to increase over the next 7 to 10 months where the borrowing is targeted, but really just to be conservative. In years after that, we've added another full percent. And so if we were to back those off to just the 1% increase, if you will, it makes as much as a 5 cents per $1,000 or 5 cents per $1,000 difference in the tax rates. So the tax rates in peak years are, I think, about $1.25 for debt. Would be about $1.20 if we were to use a lower interest rate. So that's a long way of saying that we've been conservative in the interest rates. The weighted average is approximately 3% for the 2012 borrowings. And we took bids today on actually a lower rated credit, and it came in just over 2% on similar maturities. So again, we think these are conservative estimates.
Any questions of Mr. Wagner? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just same thing. Any other questions?
Seeing no questions. Supervisor Clark, are you through?
Yes.
Any other comment? If not, roll call. P and plus if you're in favor of Resolution 66, P minus if you're opposed. Again, for the record, this is a not to exceed $8,651,259 initial offering, initial resolution. 27-0. Please read it. Read it again, please.
Policy Resolution 3 from the Finance Administration Committee regarding 2012 Kenosha County budget.
Supervisor Clark.
I move Policy Resolution 3 on the 2012 Kenosha County budget.
Policy Resolution 3 moved by Supervisor Clark, seconded by Supervisor O'Day. Supervisor Clark.
I wish I could say this was going to be as fast as a process as the first two, but it's not, unfortunately. This is a $204 million budget. It has roughly a levy increase. I should be to the exact page here, but it has roughly a levy increase of $1,070,000. Of that increase, $710,000 is something that we previously committed to, and that was our debt. The other increase, $361,000, roughly, relates to our operating budget. From year to year, that's a 0.63% increase in our operating levy. Back in July, this county board adopted a levy cap resolution with a great deal of uncertainty. We weren't aware of what was going to happen with our income maintenance. And at that time, the county board advised the county executive and the administration to come in with a 2.5% levy with a 1.5% floor in the event that we got all the money from the state for our income maintenance. We didn't get it. As a matter of fact, our worst case scenario when we were looking at our planning, our budget resolution, was about a $2.5 million loss. We lost $2.4 million. So the county executive came in with a budget proposal at 1.88%. When I look back over the history of our budget, and my first budget on the county board was 2003. It was during September of 2003 that this county board adopted a levy cap resolution and changed our entire budget process. This budget, in terms of a levy change, represents the lowest levy increase in that time, 1.88%. And in prior years, we always could hang our hat on what was the real change and what was the real feel to the taxpayer, because we had a levy increase minus new growth, and that had a real feel to the taxpayer in a lot of years of less than 1%. This year, we have very little new construction. Last year, we adopted a levy of 2.89%, and the percent change on the average homeowner came in at 1.16%. That was the real feel. That's what the average homeowner was supposed to feel. Now, that got a little bit distorted because we had apportionment, and Summers got whacked because their assessed values went up. The city's equalized and assessed values went down. So this is a generality countywide, but when you take our taxes and spread it across multiple municipalities, they use equalized values. And if those communities aren't changing exactly at the same rate, you get the distortions. Last year, the real feel was 1.16%. This year, the real feel is 1.14%. I went out and took a look at the consumer price index, what's happening with spending, inflation, whatever you want to call it. In the last 12-month cycle, we were at 3.9%, September to September. For last year, 2010, we were at 1.5%. I can take a look at, since 2003, the consumer price index changed 25%. The actual change in our tax on the average homeowner changed 5.673%. If we were following inflationary numbers and following that trend, the tax bill today on the average homeowner would be $140 higher. So I look at this budget and say financially, it's probably the best budget, one of the best budgets we've had during one of the most challenging and difficult times. So, and I know, I remember after last year's budget was adopted, I got a call from a constituent, and pretty much looked at our budget approach and said, you guys are doing it wrong. You guys are looking at an arbitrary increase rather than budgeting from your needs. And we've talked about a needs-based budget approach that, eventually, hopefully in the future, the administration takes a look at that and starts from ground zero and starts reproving the line items in the budget. But the gentleman went on to say, how do you budget? You budget a percentage increase from what you need, what you think you need. He budgets from what he has. And when his tax bill goes up, he can't go to his employer and say, I need more money because my taxes went up, my kids' shoes went up. The taxpayer said he has to make choices. Maybe his kids can't be involved in as many things. Maybe they have to cut back on going out. But the taxpayers are making real choices. So a budget is always about priority. It's how you get to the finish point. I think the next major step for this county is to take a look at evaluating the budget approach and getting away from let's pick an arbitrary number, but let's justify those numbers. That's a lot of work. That doesn't happen overnight. Other thing, I got a call from a gentleman the other day, older gentleman, 65 years old, lost his house to a tax deed. Has value, assessed value of $166,000. $25,000 is what the tax warrants were. Could not get a loan. Couldn't get a reverse mortgage. So that's a tragedy. And I don't blame that on the county. We have to execute our policies. But I am told that there's nothing we can do. So, and this is not like typical properties. When they let them go to the county, they're worth nothing. In this case, there's a substantial amount of value. So people are hurting out there. It just blows me away. So we make decisions here that impact everybody's lives, whether they be employees, whether they be Joe Public. So just talking about the tax on the average home briefly, it was $743 last year. This year it went up to $752. That's an $8.50 increase. Over since 2003, that average was $5.05 a year. 1 year ago, we sat here debating our budget, not knowing what the future was going to be. But we have a track record in this county of coming in very close, not having huge surpluses on a $204 million budget. And you have to give a lot of that credit to what I consider one of the best financial teams in government, and that would be Dave Gearson and Al Swartz. Monthly, we are tracking where our reserves are going to come in, essentially what our surplus for the year is going to be. And if we are lucky, we're going to come in overall between $300,000 and $400,000 up. So we have a tight budget. Our reserves are very important to us. Act 10, in the current climate, we lost $400,000 in shared revenue. We lost the $2.4 million in human services. Some of that was gained back, and I say really, truly, unfortunately, at the expense of our employees. $1.6 million in contributions to the Wisconsin retirement system, 1% in insurance changes, and $317,000 in overtime adjustments. Unfortunately, every day, and I'm sure the debate on insurance is going to come tonight, unfortunately, people are losing their benefits. They're being decreased. They're having to contribute more. It's not something, ideally, I would like to see. But that's the reality that we're going to be faced with, and that's what we're going to be debating tonight. One of the things when we adopted a levy cap resolution as the county board year in and year out, we said we will maintain our levy caps, but not at the expense of our future in maintaining our infrastructure. Every single budget that we have seen has maintained our roads. You can, in this budget, we're paving 13 miles of roads. We're redoing 30th Avenue. We have one of our gems in the county, Pets, is in significant need of repair. You can only put those things off so long. We're again finishing the courthouse project that was $2.75 million. We are not ignoring our problems when we're delivering the budget. I don't like doing it with debt. I hate borrowing the money, but unfortunately, we could not wait to do some of these projects. In the Gulf, there's certainly people out there that are going to be critical of spending money on a losing proposition. The Gulf is going to have a loss this year. I can't recall the exact number. There's a lot of numbers floating around in my mind, but it's about in the range of the $200,000. And that's cash. Dollars in, operating expenses out, debt service. As some would say, if we walked away from Gulf, we would have $350,000 of debt service we still have to pay. And to a lot of those people, and a lot of people don't consider it, and it was eye-opening in the early years on the board when we talked about Kemper. We debated giving them $150,000 a year. And if you consider what they do, that's probably the best bang for our buck because we got somebody else maintaining our park. And when we have our parks, it's cash flow, it's dollars out. The golf is a park, it's dollars out. I'm confident that the golf course is going to turn around. As you know, we're going to have a presentation on the golf course. In this budget resolution, we have put a hold on the red 9 from any more capital expenditures. The report that we're going to see is going to indicate that there's over $100-some thousand in savings we can experience in golf. But once again, we have an asset that we have a significant investment in. We have an irrigation system that needs to be maintained. You don't maintain that irrigation system, you might as well throw it all out the window. Cart paths, once again, when they go through the survey and they let you know what the economic impact of the golf course is to the county, the multiplier effect that it has on this county, these are things that we have to do. Can we put them off? Maybe, maybe not. Other things that we're doing to maintain our infrastructure, we have a sheriff's department, we have our squad replacements, we got to do that every year. We have our IT department, we have a regular cycle through of our equipment. There's a business intelligence project that's on the books. It's an $870,000 commitment over 2 years. Something that was proposed by IT last year. The IT steering committee pushed it back and said we need an analysis on return on investment. There was an analysis that was done by some professionals that do this every day that have no interest. They're precluded from working on this project. And it was a significant payback. I don't recall the number, but I believe it was less than 3-year payback on what they anticipated. Hopefully that investment is going to result in better information, more efficiency in the future. But that is, again, that's forward-looking. That's not maintaining the status quo. Other things in this capital project, we have CABA, $500,000 commitment to Kenosha Area Business Alliance. I have a problem with the way that we're funding it. I don't think we should be borrowing money to fund this. When we adopted this resolution, or we adopted this concept in prior years, we talked about it not being a one-time thing, but a reoccurring thing while we're going through these challenging times. And properly, if you're going to do budgeting, you need to have a regular income stream for it. And I'm one voice, but my thought is that we have to get it on the operating side of our budget. It's a reoccurring item. I wanted to tie it to sales tax. Next year, what are you going to do? Are we going to continue this? Are you going to again borrow for it? We're pressed up against our limit, or are we going to levy for it? If we are committed to this, and this is not a one-time thing, rather a reoccurring thing, it should be funded on the operating side of the budget. In the budget resolution tonight, there are major policies that are being adopted. The countywide employment policy. I think that there certainly will, this follows, for the most part, what we temporarily enacted for the 2 labor units earlier this year. There are some changes. One of those changes is mandatory overtime. Certainly I expect that that's going to be at least be debated tonight. And I'm trying to think, there's one other thing in there. I mean, we have paid time off, but it's the mandatory overtime that is the issue. The other issue that when we first saw the draft that was confusing was the jailers in the FLSA, I believe that's what it is, Fair Labor Standards Act, the 171 hours. For 2012, the Sheriff Department, and it's in the policy if you read it, is going to follow follow a different scheduling policy that for 1 year the administration says, okay, let's go ahead and try it. Our finance people evaluated it and said, we think this can work. So that is the concern that we had of the 40-hour, 40-week. That's another deviation. We adopt this PTO policy within there, but for the most part, it's with there, with what we previously adopted. We're addressing in this budget the non-rep pay plan. I believe it was in 2003 or 4. I think it was adopted probably in 2002 or 2001. And there was a provision in there where the administration had the ability to evaluate employees and then give them a step increases. Our representative employees currently get step increases based on the amount of time that they've been here. Inside the non-rep pay plan, our employees had the ability to get step increases based on merit. When the county board back then reviewed that, what was going on there, I think everybody got a 1.5% increase. So everybody was super, and they all got a 1.5% increase. The county board at that time felt that the policy was being abused and shut it down. And as a result of that, it is something that several administration committees have been looking at and monitoring and trying to deal with it. It's something that I think is important that was addressed and we got done. And because when you look at the analysis of the non-rep employees from 2000 until 2010, their dollar, inflation adjusted for inflation, or the regular increases, the regular step increases, their dollar was, I got to get to, was it was $1.38. So they increased 38 cents over 10 years, while other areas essentially doubled where they were at. So the executive and the finance administration reviewed. They want to give the executive the ability in this policy to have evaluations, and for employees that have above average evaluations, potentially there's a, if you're below a midpoint, 3%, a 2%. And if they're at the top end, it's limited. So on the lower end, they're awarded a larger amount. As we get to the more higher people that are beyond the midpoint in the various different steps, that percentage decreases. The administration in that new policy has a requirement to report at least annually to the Finance Administration Committee what step increases were awarded. So again, the legislative body of this county board will have the ability to review the effectiveness. Hopefully, and I'm sure our county executive understands history and will use that tool effectively going forward. The other thing, major item in this policy, is the adoption of a health insurance plan. Previously, health insurance plan, I think we're up to Plan F now. Previously, that plan was always adopted within the collective bargaining, and that's how the county board approved the plan. Now it's a separate issue, so that's being adopted in this resolution. All of these items are really being incorporated within the budget because they all have significant budget impacts. So it makes for a lot of work at this time. I think we have, going forward in the future, I don't know that we're going to be dealing with major changes in employment policy and a non-rep pay plan as a part of the budget, but you'll be dealing with health insurance however it changed. The other thing this resolution does, it authorizes the administration to give notices of termination to our represented units as their policy or as their contracts are expiring. As you recall, earlier this year we had to do it kind of one by one to meet deadlines. This is recognizing the fact that we're operating under a new set of rules. The contracts require us to give notices, and we're just authorizing that right now. The $500,000 for CABA is a conditional commitment. As you know, last year we put $1 million into this fund. That money has not been committed. It could be committed before the end of the year. It may not be committed. In keeping with the strategy of the county board, we're going to continue to fund that. Because it's being used with debt at this point in time, it's conditional. If CABA comes to the county board and says, hey, we have a project, we have a use, we want that money, at that point in time the county will borrow for it and then provide the funds. The authorization rests in the county executive's hands, and that is primarily being done really from a confidentiality standpoint. It's not something that we're either committed to this or not, and if something gets going, confidentiality is key in the process of landing a big client, big business. Last thing that this resolution is doing that's major, it's centralizing our accounting policy or accounting organization underneath the direction of our Chief Financial Officer, Dave Geertsen. Several years ago, we had silos, Public Works, Brookside, Sheriff's Department, Circuit Court. All the accountants were reporting to directors, and ultimately Dave Geertsen is responsible for the financial condition of the county. He needs to have the ability to have access to all of that information. That is a sound financial policy. The executive has previously adopted an executive order. This is pretty much driving the point home to the administration, which the executive agrees with, that we need to continue down that road. I think that's it. Let the fun begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Clark. Before I forget, you mentioned golf courses. I'm sure it will come up again this evening. Next Tuesday, the 15th, we will have a presentation from the group Velocity over at Carthage who did the golf course study. You should all have gotten a copy of that a week or so ago. I ask you to bring the copy with you. Hopefully you've read it before next Tuesday and you're prepared to discuss, ask questions. Yes, sir.
I failed to thank the committee members. I think having 7 members on that committee worked a lot better in the budget process because we had a lot more discussion, a lot more thoughts coming from the various different supervisors. I think that all the supervisors on that committee did their homework. They came prepared. They talked to the departments as representatives of various different committees. They shared the debate of the committees. I want to thank all the supervisors that did come to the committee and came and asked questions, shared their thoughts. I think it was a very good process, and I think 7 was a better number than 5 for this process as well.
Thank you. Okay, Supervisor Decker.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the policy resolution number 3 to include that now therefore be it resolved that beginning January 1st, 2012, any Kenosha County employee or officer who participates in any county health or dental or prescription insurance benefit shall be required to contribute 10% of the premium cost as established annually by Kenosha County.
All right, motion by Decker. Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion made by Supervisor Decker, seconded by Supervisor Clark. Now, we are going to proceed cautiously. When I say cautiously, I want to make sure everyone is on board with what the amendments are, what the discussion is. So, Supervisor Decker, before we get into any debate on this issue, I want to know specifically where in Resolution 3 you are adding that language or modifying language.
Excuse me, in amongst any of the further results.
Okay, so you don't have a specific paragraph that you're modifying. You're inserting a paragraph.
Correct.
You're comfortable with it. So we can, if something passes, we can figure out where it goes. All right, I'm going to ask you one more time to repeat it so we're clear on what we're doing.
Now, therefore be it resolved that beginning, excuse my voice.
Now, are we going to be like this all night? Or?
Yes. that beginning January 1st, 2012, any Kenosha County employee or officer who participates in any county health or dental or prescription insurance benefit shall be required to contribute 10% of the premium cost as established annually by Kenosha County.
Okay, on the debate, or on the issue.
With my voice, I think I will refrain from speaking as much as possible. Sorry.
You're through?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we are on an amendment, and I will do my best to recognize those who have their lights on the amendment. And again, I'm going to verbally ask you if you want to speak on the amendment. I want an audible yes or no, and then we'll move on from there. So next up is Supervisor Elverman on the amendment. Supervisor Singer on the amendment. I'll give you ample time to get in here if you want to speak. I'm not forcing anybody. Supervisor Rose on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak against this amendment. A similar proposal was made when Supervisor Elberman was the chair of this board, and that was never picked up by the board and advocated. It was never advocated by the administration. Times were significantly different then than they are now. I asked the personnel department to prepare, and they left on your desk, an employee analysis of some typical employee scenarios, what the current state of the law is with respect to employee contributions to the Wisconsin retirement system benefit, as well as the contribution that employees will make under the current budget as proposed to you by the administration and as adopted by the Finance Committee. It's not a premium contribution, but it is a contribution to the health care costs that every employee and the employee's family will incur. Supervisor Boyd Frederick added to it to demonstrate what the additional premium cost might be under two other scenarios. But let's just take what has been presented here first as a typical or average employee salary of $52,200 gross. And if you deduct from that for 2012 the retirement system benefit as well as the contribution that the employee will share in the health insurance benefit, that gross salary of $52,200 is then reduced to $47,301 without considering a premium contribution. That is a significant amount for any employee, going from $52,200 down to $47,301. If you take a clerical employee, and if you go to page 2 here, average clerical county employee with family health insurance coverage, and that other example I gave you was also a family health insurance coverage. And we said, well, this clerical employee made $49,256 with the two deductions to retirement, as well as a share of the health insurance benefit. That employee's gross wages then become $44,530. It seems to me that this is a significant enough contribution that is being made by these employees to the current budget at the state level or at the local level. I think it becomes a matter of fairness. If these two contribution issues were on the table, if they weren't contributing to the retirement, that's new. If they weren't contributing what is indicated here to the health insurance benefit at the local level, then I think this resolution would have some merit and could be considered and debated. But that isn't the situation. This isn't the term of office where chairman of the county board was Supervisor Elberman, and he proposed something similar to this. At that time, there was no contribution to the retirement system or these kinds of health insurance benefit costs that are shown on this chart. So when you ask an employee to come up with an additional 10% over and above what I have stated here, it strikes me as unfair. It strikes me as unrealistic, and it strikes me as punitive. One of the speakers said, well, employees should dig deeper. I think they have and are digging deeper, considerably so, much more than they are in the private sector. I think we want people to have respectable incomes here. I think these are respectable incomes. You have to consider the fact that Wisconsin's incomes are below the national average. Wisconsin incomes are falling behind it nationally. They're on the decline, whereas other states are in the increase. That's a fact that has to be considered. And if you look at our budget, this is not some extravagant tax increase. This is under 2%, 1.8%, as Supervisor Clark mentioned. Very defensible. We have no control over the city. We have no control over the school district. I think that 1.8% is extremely conservative, extremely modest, extremely fair. I think what we're doing this evening in presenting this budget to you is a fair budget. I urge your rejection of the amendment to this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark on the amendment.
First of all, I'm going to ask for a friendly amendment to the amendment. I supported an amount for 5%. I moved it to get it out there. I'm going to ask that the amount be changed to 5%.
Is that a motion?
I'm asking for a friendly amendment first from the maker of the amendment.
Supervisor Decker, are you inclined to modify your motion to 5%? That's a no. Supervisor Clark.
I will make an amendment to change it to 5%.
Motion by Supervisor Clark to change the amendment by Supervisor Decker for a 5% premium contribution to all employees as opposed to 10%. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Clark.
Okay. When the budget came out, certainly the word was used, 20% contribution. Certainly the employees, like other employees, have within their plan, whether it be copay, deductibles, coinsurance, that is a cost share. In addition to that, employees in government and out of government are being asked to make an employee contribution. One of the things that we asked for in the Finance Committee was to take a look at comparable counties. There are several counties here that have copays. I'm sorry, employee contributions, while they have deductibles or some form of copay. These counties aren't named, but County 1 has a proposal that hasn't been approved just for a flat dollar of $170 a month on family, while they have deductible family of $1,500. I think Supervisor Rose's analysis had $1,800 in there. Out-of-pocket max for the family is $5,000. They pay for inpatient and outpatient. They have drug cards. Another county has 15% contribution, while they have deductibles, $1,400 single, out-of-pocket $3,750, max out-of-pocket. Another county, 12%, 10%, 7% contributions based on wellness participation. We want our employees to have healthy lifestyles, and the more healthy they are, the lower their contribution is going to be. So they do some of those things that we are incorporating into this policy. 15% by another county, 12% by another county, premium contribution. I think Gateway in Kenosha here, I think they've got their employees got hit with the 12% this year and the premium contribution as well. Many employees, many workers in Kenosha County are dealing with premium contributions. You know, I just went and pulled out an old resolution that was drafted before, so it has information that's dated earlier this year. But we talk about what the average wage of a county employee is and what the average wage of Joe Public is, and there's substantial differences. So there's arguments here that are being made. I work for the county because I get better benefits, but less pay. I don't think that holds water. Someone here yesterday said, well, if you're going to take our flex away and you're going to make us pay to our contribution, that's going to be less money into this economy. Well, how about more money into the economy because the taxpayers have more money to spend? I don't that argument. So it comes down to the administration has done a great job. They've done a great job of making our employees consumers, and there are savings, certainly, as a result of that. And maybe it's 20%. We have a family policy here, and I'm just going to use a rough number. He has a $22,000 premium. We're self-insured. So that means that's 80% of the cost. So that's $27,000 on a family policy of what we're paying out or whatever. Racine County, health, dental, premium contribution of 15%. They don't have all the copays that we have, but they have some modest deductibles within their policy. They have deductibles, and they're putting out $1,200, $1,500 out of their pocket, and then they're also paying premium. So when you look at all the various different comparables, and you hear the argument that we're making them consumers and we're so good, it's not mutually exclusive. Everybody's being asked to do it. I think it's time. I think it's time we start. I called 30 of my constituents randomly, and the numbers bear out. There were 27 of them that said they thought, even knowing that there's copays, that a 5% contribution by county employees was reasonable. They thought it was reasonable that they do that at this time, understanding that they're now contributing to their pension. Their employers aren't contributing to their pensions. Our employees have a defined benefit plan. It's based on how much money you make, and that's what your retirement benefit is. Nowhere else. Everybody else is putting their money into the 401k. Maybe they're getting an employer match, but when the market goes to hell, they're not getting that money. So I think you should consider. It is what's happening outside these walls. It's what's happening in the walls of other governments. It's time to take that step. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Noble, on the amendment of the amendment, obviously the two are intertwined, so on the amendment.
I actually have some mixed feelings on this. I mean, Supervisor Rose talked about 6 years ago, I've always supported premium contribution, and I strongly feel that we need a blend of premium contribution as well as copays. In private industry where I work, I mean, we have a deductible is $3,000, we have $35 copays, and we contribute 25% towards the premium. So, and my insurance agent says we've got good benefits compared to most private, privately held smaller companies. So, so on the one hand, to be consistent with how I've always voted in the past, I want to support this 5% contribution. On the other hand, this particular year, as Supervisor Rose said, this is a little bit of an unusual year, and the thing that bothers me more than anything is half of the employees still would not be affected by this 5% contribution. And to that end, I want to actually ask a question to Ray Ann Boudry, who wrote this letter from Horton, and she has in the middle of it, and I believe she's talking about this fact that 50% of her employees wouldn't be contributing. She has a sentence that says, "This is not ethical or, quite frankly, not likely legal." I want to make sure that she's talking about that. I believe she's in attendance.
Approach your microphone, please.
I think it's a bad precedent for the board in the course of debate to be calling upon citizens who write us to challenge what they say.
This isn't a citizen who wrote us, Supervisor Rose. This is, in fact, the consultant that the administration
I see.
hired
Okay, I'm
to
sorry.
set up the insurance plan.
All right.
Otherwise,
Very
I
good.
agree with you. State your name and name, please.
Rayanne Baudry, the Horton Group.
Do you understand the question from Supervisor Noble?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, members of the county board, and members of the public that are in attendance. Supervisor Noble is talking about my discussion in this letter on how premium equivalents are drafted. And what is currently happening here at Kenosha County is all of the plans, and we are now on Plan G, as Supervisor Clark alluded to, and we also have some named plans that are much older and have been in existence for a while, such as the Standard, the Pyramid, and the Partners Plan. So there's, over the course of the entire county population that is insured, we have approximately 11 different health insurance plans. Because no one contributes today, there is not a premium contribution, to speak specifically not to cost sharing, which is the co-payments and deductibles that Supervisor Clark responded to, but specifically a premium contribution. We use one set of premium equivalents for COBRA rates. So meaning that when we are looking at a budget rate for health insurance premiums, a single plan is X dollars, a family plan is X dollars, regardless of the health insurance plan somebody is covered under. What I specifically was addressing is that if indeed we go to a premium contribution for 1/2 approximately of the employee population, because some people are still covered by collective bargaining agreements that do not expire until the end of 2012, so they cannot be assessed a premium contribution, and some retirees have retired under a different scenario where they also cannot be required to A, join the plan we're advocating, or B, perform a bigger premium contribution than that which they retired under. The challenge would be we would have to rate every one of these programs based on the population that they would be covering and the utilization of those individuals. So it would be age, sex rated, and it would be, or demographically rated, and each health plan that's available to county employees would have to be rated on its individual experience. That would take time. So what I'm suggesting here in my letter to the county board is that by the time you do that calculation, those on older plans with fewer co-payments, no deductibles in some cases, no prescription drug co-pays, would be rated substantially higher than the plan we're advocating for. So the 5% would not be 5% across the budget, and I just wanted to make that clear.
You say 5% across the budget, you mean 5% across all employees?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Or each plan.
Correct. Supervisor Noble.
All right, thank you. The other thing, as long as you're up there, you make a comment on, it says premium contributions only cost shift budget issues. I'm going to ask if you consider what I'm going to call the incremental savings that you have once you have premium contributions, because once you have the employees starting to contribute towards the premium, X percentage of the employees will waive the insurance, hence the taxpayer no longer has the burden of having that employee to pay for it because the person all of a sudden is waived. For example, in my small company, with our premium participation, we have, I think it's 17% of the employees waive the insurance, and that's a true savings. And I don't buy the premium. I don't buy that concept that says premium contributions only, and I stress the word only, cost shift budget issues. I believe there's an incremental savings beyond cost shifting. Would you respond to that?
Certainly, thank you for the question. I'm not sure exactly, Supervisor Noble, how your plan is structured or how it's paid, but in Kenosha County, being a self-funded health plan, when we have healthy people who either don't use health insurance on a real aggressive basis or don't access the system, we only lose in terms of premium, if you will, for people waiving fixed costs, which are significantly a very small portion of the total premium equivalent. So, for example, here at Kenosha County, we have a $150,000 specific deductible. That is per belly button on the plan, for lack of a better way to explain it. So the county doesn't lose all of the premium that a fully insured company would lose. So, if, for example, if I'm paying a fixed dollar to Anthem Blue Cross, for example, to take all my risk, and somebody waives, yes, I save as an employer that total premium. At Kenosha County, when we have such a large deductible and we self-fund the claims, it's actually a bigger risk to lose healthy people by the fact that they would waive off the health insurance because they're not using claims dollars now, and they're balancing the risk of those that are significantly less healthy. So it's not necessarily a complete dollar-for-dollar savings for everybody that waives. In fact, it can be a significant risk.
Okay, didn't expect that answer. Seems like...
Any other questions?
Yeah. The other question would be, and again, I say I'm torn, and I still don't even know which way I'm going to vote on this, but I will say if I do not support the 5%, I will be looking for some type of, and personally I believe we need to get there in 2013 when all employees are going to be affected. But going on with the question, and I don't think this is for you though, in this presentation that was prepared by, was talked about by Supervisor Rosen / Supervisor Boyd Frederick, the increased employment share of health insurance benefits. And I was talking to Dave Gerson because I'm looking what the co-pays went up, and they're like $2 for an office visit. And they're fairly minor increases. So I was wondering how did they come up with an $1,800 increase in health insurance benefits for a family. And the big number apparently is that $800 contribution that we made last year to the flex spending. And you know how I felt about that last year. I voted against the budget, and I think I voted against every contract that's ever become, has come before the county board in the last 6 years, because I've strongly felt that that shouldn't be in there. But now it seems to me a little bit disingenuous to say that's an increased share of health insurance benefits when that in fact was a contribution, not a cost of health insurance for the employee. I mean, how do you justify that in this graph?
Mr. Gertzen.
We're not being disingenuous on that. I think we're being forthright and forthcoming on that. That was a budgeted amount. It was a benefit. Most of the employees claimed that we did have a little bit of money left at the end of the year. I think the number was roughly 10 to 20%. We factored that in to our analysis. So when you're looking at the impact on what's going to hit an employee from an out-of-pocket standpoint, I think it's fair to include that $800 in this analysis that was requested and include that in the percentage. It affects the pocketbook of the employee. The purpose of this analysis was to show how that would be impacted, and that's what that accomplished. So of that $1,800, $800 is a true impact on the employee.
But it's not an impact on his net salary. This thing clearly says new net salary.
Yeah, I remember debating that internally when we were doing the analysis. Where will the money come from now? The money will come from the wages that we pay the employee. They won't have that $800 economic benefit to cover their medical costs anymore. That money will come out of that $52,000 number. That's a fair number to include in the analysis.
All right, well, I'll just conclude with, I guess I'm happy in some regards that we got rid of that flex spending. It seemed a long time in coming, and I'm going to throw out, again, I want to say it one last time, if I don't support the 5% in this budget, I will be supporting it in future budgets, and stress the fact that it took, I was stressing eliminating this $800 contribution for a family for several years, and it finally comes to fruition, so I'm hoping that so will a blend of premium contributions as well as co-pays comes to fruition in the next year's budget, 2013.
Thank you. Supervisor Grady on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a brief statement and then ask Mr. Riedel to come to the podium so we can answer a question. Throughout our budget deliberations, it was made more than abundantly clear that one of the biggest costs associated with a health care plan is the utilization of the services. And in many cases where the person who's insured is paying a premium or the county is paying a premium, whatever the case may be, sometimes that premium does not really work in favor of utilization. In fact, the two can be mutually exclusive. I'd like Mr. Riedel to comment upon utilization costs and the way this is structured in the current employee agreement, and then to comment upon the proposed 5%. Thank you.
The plan as it was originally configured and remains today and proposed to you this evening is all about controlling utilization, Supervisor Grady. We have structured the impact to county employees so that they will make good consumer choices with respect to their health care decisions. An ideal example would be the co-payments associated with prescription medicine. If you choose to take a formulary or non-formulary prescription medicine, you will pay more than if you pay for generic. And we know that it works because our employees now have reduced the amount of formulary and non-formulary usage by a significant percentage, and we now see 71% of our drug distribution coming from the generic category. That's a great savings for Kenosha County. If you get your drugs at Walgreens, like many of us do, they give you the actual cost of the drug and how much your health care has saved. And if you compare, you'll see that difference. Our health plan charges you every time you enter the system. Co-payments and plans that have a mixed premium share and utilization control mechanism do not do that. So if you have a medical condition and you require therapy, every time you go to therapy, you pay the $35 copay. Why is that important? Because our employees frequently will say to their therapist, is there exercises I can do at home? Is there an at-home therapy program? We are adding to this budget and our health care, which is really going to be a cool thing, a comprehensive wellness program, something we have never had here, and that our employees will be able to judge their wellness and their progress toward improved wellness through a third-party objective administrator of this particular wellness program, and it won't cost the county any more money than it puts forth toward wellness today. We eventually likely will associate some sort of premium share with progress in the wellness program, and that would be the best way to introduce a premium share, if I can transition to your second question, because it does directly impact utilization. Everything about this plan is about controlling utilization. I want to say one more thing, if I can. Any premium share contribution is spread equally across our 1,000 employees. I must tell you that our employees have different profiles as individuals. You know that many of our employees are $11 an hour. The plan as proposed allows our employees to make less expensive choices, allows our employees to use less expensive providers, allows our employees to use less expensive drugs and achieve the benefit of a lower cost associated with that. Premium does not do that. In fact, premium does not control utilization at all. And I believe in Ms. Beaudry's letter it says that premium contribution can actually work in reverse. That if you have a number of dependents on your plan and I don't have any, I'm not getting the same bang for my buck you are, and the tendency on occasion is for me to use it unnecessarily. Our track record is very clear at 6.1% on adjusted cost per year over 10 years. I think we should be the envy of those who have health plans, and I strongly urge your support. Did I answer your question?
Just back to follow up now. When you say that the premium contributions are equally spread across the county's 1,000 employees, that still does not take into account some employee groups have contracts that run through 2012.
Yeah, it's important that the board consider, as they consider the amendments proposed, that whatever decisions you make on healthcare tonight, they only affect about 50% of our employees.
Okay. Good. That's my point. I want to finish up with a comment then. Based upon the fact that administration has already taken the lead in controlling costs by addressing utilization, I think that an attempt at this point to have a higher amount paid in premiums by the employees is philosophically perhaps not the way to go. It is a way to go, but it's probably not the best way to go. The second point being, for only going to be affecting approximately 50% of the employees, I think that's rather unjust to have a group that is covered or a group that's paying and a group that's not. I do support more along the lines of Supervisor Noble's situation, the proposition of addressing the entire thing in 2013 when all employees would be on a so-called level playing field. So at this point, I'd be disinclined. I would not support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Kohlmeyer on the amendment?
So the question is either Supervisor Decker or Supervisor Clark. If either of you have any total amounts this is going to save for the tax levy on the 5% or the 10%? Is there any figures?
Either.
Chief Geertsen has been asked to calculate that number previously. He may have that.
Mr. Geertsen.
It's about $500,000.
Which one? Which one?
The 5%.
5% is $500,000.
Right.
Okay. Anything else? All right. We still have Supervisor Elverman and Singer on the board on the amendment.
I'll talk on the amendment. I'm kind of disappointed in all of this because what the administration has put together, I think, is pretty comprehensive and gets us money from the workers to do what we need to do. What I don't understand is why somewhere in today's world or whatever, we have this payday loan mentality where we beat up on the people that can least afford it. If you look at the numbers that were provided on this from Supervisor Frederick, if you look at the salaries, it hits the lower income people harder as a percentage than anybody else. So if I'm making $100,000 in salary, it's a smaller percentage. If I'm making $52,000, it's a little bit higher. It's extremely high if you're an $11 an hour employee. It just beats you up. And these are people that have already been beaten up. Okay? How much more can they take? We can't just keep doing this to them. Okay? A wise man once told me, I listened to him, he said, these tools that were supposedly given to us from the state, our governor, a tool can be either a tool or a weapon, depending on how it's used. So let's not use this tool as a weapon, because they've already been hurt enough. I'm against this amendment, and I'm against the original amendment as well. We'll be voting against both of them.
Thank you. Supervisor Elverman? Tough to resist, isn't it?
To stay out of this in the worst way. Hoping that I can inch my way back up to the top of the list for what I was. But I guess I have a question to both. I'm really not sure. We're debating Supervisor Clark's amendment to the amendment at this point?
Both are on the floor.
Both are on the floor, so I'll have a question.
Well, Supervisor Clark's motion is on the floor. We have to dispose of Supervisor Clark's amendment to the amendment before we go any further. However, I am allowing debate across the board. You want to talk about 10% or 5%?
Okay, I'll ask.
I don't care.
It's either 5 or 10. Whoever would like to answer, Supervisor Clark or Supervisor Decker. I guess I'll base this to Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Decker, are you including elected officials in this?
Not my plan.
It was not your plan.
Well, you mean county board supervisors or all
No.
elected officials?
Elected officials.
Elected officials, yes, minus county board supervisors.
Pardon?
Elected officials, yes, minus county board supervisors.
County board supervisors, as we know, are not in the discussion of insurance at all. That terminates, sunsets in April of 2012.
Correct. I guess for discussion here then this evening, I could support a version of this. I don't know how I got dragged into it. Some supervisor mentioned this evening that what we tried in, I think it was 2004, 2005. And I think a lot of this discussion would have been averted if that would have worked, where we did go at county board supervisors for 10%, elected officials at 10%, and they did pay it for approximately a year. And then that was voted back out. Elected officials at this point in Kenosha County, I believe, can voluntarily pay. I don't think any of them are doing it at this point, from what I've heard. So what I would like to see is one of the makers of these motions include elected officials. Naturally, we know county board supervisors who, again, initiated this and paid 10% for 5 years and 15%, and are still paying. I heard this evening that no one's paying contributions, but county board supervisors are paying 15% at this point. That someone in their amendment here to the budget include elected officials, and then I believe we're actually showing the constituents that we're serious. The elected officials can show the constituents that they're serious, and we can have a serious discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Clarification, Supervisor Elverman and the rest of the board. The clerk, treasurer, register of deeds, I'm not sure who else is included in that, all pay 10% in their health insurance as a premium contribution currently. That has not changed. Since we initially did it, what did not move forward from that point on was growing that contribution to include other county employees. Unless the clerk isn't as straight up and honest as Mr. Geertsen. And I'm not passing judgment, I'm just telling you. Sheriff, too. Yes, sir.
Can I have Mr. Riedel give us that information? Because I do believe that they're not paying. The elected officials are not paying them.
Before the last election, we removed the contribution for the elected officials who were up for election, which would be about 2 years ago. The elected officials who remain paying the 10% are elected officials whose terms have not expired since you took that action. And so the action, because we can't change elected officials' wage and benefit package in midterm. So I believe the legislation as it stands today is elected officials get the same health insurance package as the non-represented employees and remain unchanged. Those elected officials who the chairman mentioned earlier would not be paying 10% as part of the wage and benefit package the next time they were up for election.
That's how I understood it. So again, to the makers of the motion, if they include that concept, I could endorse it and get on board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It is included in the original amendment as well as the amendment to the amendment, as Supervisor Clark did not modify that.
I didn't hear the language in either of them. That included elected officials.
It includes elected officials. And that's been confirmed by Supervisor Decker.
My intent was to include elected officials at the time that they're reelected and able to change the plan. Obviously, midterm you cannot.
All right. I don't want an intent. I want to know that
Well,
you stated that,
it
correct?
states it in there,
That's
that
what I-
all county employees and officers.
Mr. Chairman, that wasn't stated when the amendment was made.
I read the amendment the way I have it written down. Would you like
Can
me to read?
we have that read again?
Yes. This is my version. Now therefore be it resolved that beginning January 1st, 2012, any Kenosha County employee or officer who participates in any county health or dental or prescription insurance benefit shall be required to contribute 10% of the premium cost as established annually by Kenosha County.
Officer includes elected officials in this reference. I'm not speaking for her.
Right.
That's her intent.
Yeah. I would like to see the word elected official in there.
I'm told you can have as many as 3 amendments on the floor.
Would you like to make a friendly amendment?
If that's the offer. Are you suggesting a friendly amendment?
I'm suggesting that instead of the word officer, employee, or elected official.
It's out of order.
And what would make
Elected,
yours in order
elected
would-
officials are governed by the compensation that we establish by resolution, and our fine corporation counsel, who's moving in a new office space, will tell you that we can't take away their compensation,
Supervisor
and
Clark,
that is
I
compensation.
think you're getting ahead of yourself. The suggestion here, as Mr. Riedel alluded, would in fact impact the elected officials at their next election.
After next election, but that's established by a separate resolution. There's a separate resolution that establishes their compensation.
I understand that.
Okay.
Corporation Counsel, would you like to comment on that? Is the inclusion of elected officials in the amendment that is before this county board appropriate?
The way I heard her amendment, it was that it would include elected officials who, or officers who are currently participating in the insurance. I believe that's how you stated the amendment. You have elected officials or officers, however you want to call it, who are participating. They're all participating in the insurance. Some are in the midterm, some are not. So I think you have to tie it into the term. You could have the sheriff, say for example, he's midterm. I don't know if he's participating in the insurance. You could have the county executive who maybe just got, I'm not just using this as an example, who just got elected. You'd have to wait until his next term.
All right.
That may be your intent, but I don't think your wording references the term.
That discussion has taken place on this board floor many times, primarily specific to county supervisors.
Right.
So it is at least an assumption on my part. The specific question I believe Supervisor Clark is asking is because we've set the compensation for elected officials by independent resolution, right? Assuming that Supervisor Decker intends or specifically states that it will affect elected officials at their next election, are we able to make that change here tonight if the board is so inclined, given that we set their compensation with a separate resolution?
I think you could, and then the separate resolution would take care of wages and any other benefits at that time. When you do the resolution on the wage and benefit package for the elected officials, you would have a policy in place that would say that the elected officials would be contributing 5% or 10% or whatever percent you agreed upon at their next term.
Is that clear? Any further questions, clarifications? Supervisor Ellerman, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, then, I know that we have done it in the past, so I would offer that as a friendly amendment to Supervisor Decker, that we use the word elected official other than officer.
And that we recognize that we cannot make the change until their next election, correct?
Correct.
All right. Anything else?
No.
I'll unscramble this by the time we're done. Supervisor Hallman? On the amendment, correct?
Yes, on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go on record as saying that I'm not in favor of this. Not in favor of 5, and I'm not in favor of 10. I did some listening to county employees, and there were a number of them that expressed their concern that something like this might come up. And I had a few of them actually cry, and I had to give out a couple of hugs, which is not necessarily my character outwardly, I will admit that. They expressed that there would be difficulty for a number of them in terms of paying their mortgage. There were a number that expressed difficulty in terms of providing for their children. Some had elderly parents that they were also caring for. And as many of you know, and I've said it a number of times in these chambers, that some of my constituents, a great many of them, are some of the poorest that we have in Kenosha County. And you can say what you want about poor folks. Some of you can say it, and you have said it. But one thing that I know is this. Well, there's two things. The first is that I certainly don't want to see any of our county employees, whether they are union or non, end up in a situation where they have to live like some of my constituents. I don't even want some of my constituents to live the way that they live, which is why I do this job. But I want to make this point before I close my remarks. One of the things that my parents taught me was to demand excellence and to demand better. And when I hear that we have to make these changes to be comparable to the private sector, I have to wonder about the force of our voice in terms of economic development in this community, to make sure that when we do bring businesses here, that we don't have to have debates like this, that this question about equity between public and private doesn't have to arise. We have the voice, we have the ability to make sure that we don't have to get into this kind of quandary. And I would hope that going down the road, that we would use it, that we would make it stronger, because that's what pushing for excellence is, that's what demanding better is, not a race to the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Arrington on the amendment.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to support 5%, I'm not going to support 10%. I'm inclined to agree with my fellow supervisors who have already spoken out about this issue. First of all, the budget that we have agreed, or we're in the process of trying to move forward, I believe that it's very fair. And with that said, I need us to be fair. And I just don't believe that asking our Kenosha County employees, they're our employees, I mean, and we govern a lot of the things that they do. It's not fair to ask them to do anything else. These people, they work their job, they do as they do to keep their job. And, you know, when it's time to do the right thing, then that's what we need to do. I've heard different arguments on this floor all night. You know, and I'm not even in lieu of all the facts, but the one thing that I do understand is that I hear things that half of the employees this will affect and half of it will not affect. Well, then how is that fair? If we cannot do it as a whole, then we shouldn't do it at all. And we need to get out of that habit. I'm just going to say it, Mr. Chairman. I respect all of our county board supervisors. I respect everyone's opinion on this floor. We have to learn how to stand strong on our word. I don't think that this is a good situation for any of us. We have to tell our constituents a lot of different things. I serve the 10th District. The 10th District is equally poor. The 10th District has a lot of challenges down there. And one of the things that I hope we can do as a board is do the right thing. I don't believe that we should do a 5% or a 10% at this time. It's something I'd be willing to listen to in the future. But see, you can't push something that cannot be done equally. It doesn't shed a good light on the board because you affect half of the people and then you don't affect the other half. So when we make decisions, we need to make decisions that would include everybody. And I just don't believe that right now is the time for us to vote on these amendments. And I'm hoping that we can all come to a collective agreement to not do this right now. I understand what we're trying to do, but the timing is not good right now. And I urge that we support what we already have in place from the beginning once we get past the discussion of these two amendments. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Supervisor Singer.
I'll hold off till later.
Get your light again, please. Supervisor Kohlmeyer.
I just want to speak on the amendment now. This is a tough issue, and I thought about this a lot. I go back to what I started with, though, back a few weeks ago, that this is kind of why, this is where the rubber meets the road as far as why we're elected to make the tough decisions. And I think times have changed. I think that's one reason we have to look at starting to look at something like this, because everywhere people in the economy, like Supervisor Clark said, benefits are changing in other governments, in the private sector. And certainly nobody wants to pile on to employees. I mean, I totally understand they are taking a hit with a lot of the changes, and that's the gap that we need to close to get to 0% is about $1 million. And I don't think it should be fully put on the employees. And that's kind of why I'm for the 5% and not necessarily the 10%. And I think there may be other amendments within the budget tonight that we could close that gap to 0. But I think it's time that we've led the way, county supervisors, with our own insurance. We've eliminated it to 0, so I think we have validity in speaking on this issue. And elected officials, some are already paying 10%, so I think there's already gaps as far as who's paying what in fairness. It's a tough issue. I totally get it. It's tough. It's a vote I truly wish I wouldn't have to take, but I believe I owe it to the taxpayers I represent to close the gap. I think people expect the 0%. We may not get it tonight, but I think we should strive everything that we can to do to get to a flat tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Michael on the amendment.
Chairman, just briefly, I cannot support either amendment. We've heard a lot regarding individuals comparing the public and private sector. And being the chair of the Judiciary and Law, listening to the sheriff and looking at our budget when we deal with a surplus, in a private sector, when an individual works for a company that has a surplus, for instance, like Abbott Laboratories, they give off dividend checks, they give off a lot of things. And if you look at this situation, I mean, we should be cutting a check to our jailers for this surplus of money that they've created. You cannot look at government like a private entity. I mean, we provide a service, our employees are different. I just don't believe it's fair, and I don't think it's equitable to ask for them to give up anything more than they've already done. I mean, I think the Finance Committee, I believe the county exec did an excellent job with his budget, and I feel that the members of this board can talk to our constituents and say, we did the right thing, and I don't believe that we have to go any further. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark on the amendment.
Yes. Just briefly, on fairness, half the employees are contributing to their pension. Half the employees, or the non-reps, throughout the years have been given different raises than those that we bargained for. So all at once we're worried about fairness. We're dealing with a timing issue. Relative to the elected officials, health insurance contributions, some are making it, some aren't. But certainly relative to the pension contributions, some of those are protected by Act 10 or in the opinion of our Corporation Council. And there's nothing to prevent our elected officials from contributing to their pension like the rest of their brothers. Supervisor Noble makes a point that he asked the question, it didn't get driven home, but here's the point that I think he was going at. If you have a free benefit, some people are going to take it, whether they need it or not. And I almost think they're required to when you get into two spouses working and one of them has health insurance and one doesn't. I believe you are required to, and the county's at risk. Somewhere along the way I've heard that. To have a contribution, I think you may have fewer people on the policy. Therein lies the savings. Certainly there's the argument of selective who's in the group, because then you're going to not have the healthy people take the insurance. Fair argument. And finally, when Mr. Riedel talks about co-pays, different amounts for prescriptions, and being inside of network and being outside of network, we're making our employees be consumers. Every single one of these that we've looked at, all 8 of these, when you look at the industry statistics, it's either co-pays, or it's a deductible, or it's co-insurance, and they're paying. So every time you go to the doctor, whether it's a co-pay or a deductible, and you're getting to your out-of-pocket, you're going to pay. So that's going to prevent you from going to the doctor or asking the question, maybe I can have at-home therapy. So I'm supporting this because I believe it's time. Thank you.
Supervisor Haas on the amendment.
Chairman, there's no way I can support this. Let's kind of look at a couple things here. You know, when this started up in Madison, it didn't start here, okay? And the poor is poor. They can't get anywhere. They never will. And we take care of the poor through our taxes. You know, we give them benefits and stuff. They're on welfare, okay? This has hit the middle class. You know, we talked about 401. If anybody's in a 401, they're going to probably have to work till they're 70 years old. If we pass this tonight, this 5 or 10%, these people can't even save, okay? They can't even make their house payments. I mean, we're talking big chunks here that they're already giving up. You know, we can't keep beating up the middle class. The rich, according to the Wall Street Journal, is getting richer by the minute. It's the fastest thing in America right now, the rich. They're getting so rich faster than any time in history, and it's hit the middle class. You know, our employees here, I feel, are middle class. We can't keep beating them up. We got to respect them. They do a good job. I will not support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Singer and Arrington on the amendment. Supervisor Arrington on the amendment.
Just one thing I wanted to add, because I'm going to stand my ground on this fairness issue, okay? Supervisor Clark, I understand that we may have not been fair all year, but we need to be fair tonight. If we do this to half of the Kenosha County employees this year, this comes back up with a new board next year, and then we find that we come back, okay, say we agree on the 5% tonight. We come back next year, it's 10%. Have you been fair to the people, to the half of the Kenosha County employees that you did it to tonight? That's my point. The only thing I'm saying is that, is it time? Yes, but it's not time tonight because we cannot capture everybody tonight. That's all I'm saying, is that if we're going to do this as a board, let's not neglect half of the people that this would affect. We need to make sure that we encompass everyone in our decision. That's what I need every one of the board members to think about. It's not that we don't want to do this, but you're going to leave half of them out, and we need to further discuss that so that we can capture everyone in our decision. We just cannot make these quick decisions like this, and we have to get out of that habit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No other lights other than Supervisor Singer. On the amendment? Roll call on the amendment. I will make sure we're clear on the amendment. This is the amendment to the amendment. It is a 5% contribution by all employees and elected officials at the elected officials' next term. I think that sums it up. Starts January 1, 2012. P plus if you're in favor of the amendment to the amendment, which is a 5% contribution. P minus if you're opposed. Motion fails 22-4 with 1 abstention. Before you now is a 10% contribution, and that has not been disposed of, so if you're inclined to continue to debate it, I will continue to push buttons. I have a light on. Supervisor Singer.
I request roll call.
Okay. You wanted to close debate is what you wanted to do. You'll notice I'm not going to pay too much attention to that this evening. All right. Before you now is Supervisor Decker's original amendment, which is a 10% contribution. All other statements I made previously apply. Roll call requested. P and plus if you're in favor. P and minus if you're opposed. Motion again fails. 22-4 24-2 with 1 abstention. So, 1 item down maybe, we move on. Let me make this point before we go on in case any other discussion gets to only 50% of the employees, only whatever percent of the employees. Keep in mind, every single time we address a contract over the years, any issue that has come before this board relative to an employee group, it has to start somewhere. It never affects 100%. Every contract affects that group. And it either goes from there or it doesn't. So I only make that point so that we're factual in the statements that we're making. We recognize it will only affect a certain group. That is every single contract we've approved over the years. All right, next up, Supervisor Singer.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate you calling on me.
Next. No, that's it. Your time's up. We're going brief.
I would like to proceed to the policies and procedure part of the, it's on page 15 of it, section 2, considering overtime.
Say it again, what section?
It's page 15, section 2, overtime.
Thank you.
There's like two page 15, so it's got to be on the policy and procedures section. Kenosha County policies and procedures. Page 15 of the procedures. So it's the second page 15 if you're in your packet. It says overtime. Is everybody on there?
Page 15 of the budget or the resolution?
The resolution.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Under overtime, I'd like to make an amendment to the policy resolution number 3, and it would be the first paragraph of section 2 under overtime. When you get to such request for overtime, I want that to read is voluntary except during emergency county executive orders.
All right, I need you to be more specific, please.
Such a request for overtime is considered voluntary, comma, except during emergency county executive orders.
My first paragraph
Period.
does not read that way, so I need to get caught up.
Under overtime 2.
I'm looking at overtime 2. The first paragraph you referenced starts out
On the bottom of the paragraph, it says such request for overtime.
Okay. Again, my paragraph 1 doesn't start that way. If you want me to be on board with you, I need to get there.
It's the bottom of it, not the top of it. It's the last sentence of the first paragraph in that section.
That's the clarification. That's the clarification I'm looking for.
Okay. Such request for overtime is considered voluntary, comma, except during emergency county executive orders, period. And then it is considered mandatory during snow and ice removal for Kenosha County Highway Department employees, period.
Motion made by Singer, seconded by, I believe, Underhill. Was that? Don't be bashful. Whoever said it first, I don't care. Supervisor Arrington, for crying out loud.
Chairman, the reason.
I heard it all, but I heard someone over here first. Okay. They just don't apparently want to admit to it. Supervisor Singer.
On the amendment, when you get that cleared up, on the amendment, the reason I bring this up is because this is what we debated about the temporary rules. We didn't really go over it in Finance Committee. It is a concern of the employees. It's a concern of many of the county board supervisors, and that's why I made the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on the amendment? 1 second here. Supervisor Elverman on the amendment? Supervisor Clark on the amendment? Supervisor Arrington on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll support this. In the past, I know that they've done a very good job. I think this is just an issue of the verbiage and language we're going to use, but there's no doubt in my mind that they'll continue to do a good job for the county, and I'll get on board with this and support this verbiage being added under this overtime paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Elverman on the amendment yet? You're the only light left.
Mr. Chairman, I'd still like my light to be on for the next.
You're fine. Go ahead.
But I would like some clarification as far as we used to have dates listed when we did this. Now, you just said for snow and ice. I don't know how you phrase that, but I think we should make that.
Removal season. So if you want to put the season in there. Yeah. I mean, it's. I can't.
It's your amendment, sir.
I can't add to it. I can't add to it. During snow and ice removal season.
Well, which could mean a whole lot.
Well, I'll leave that up to the administration to determine.
Okay.
Because I don't know when the first snow is.
All right.
Or the first ice.
Supervisor Elverman, push your light again, please. Supervisor Boyd Frederick, do you have a question?
No, why don't we just, since he was looking for it, why don't we say October to April? Because that's pretty much what.
Supervisor Frederick, is that an amendment?
Would you take that as an amendment? Just so we have dates on it.
I would rather just leave it up to administration because it may not need to be that long.
All right, so there's no acceptance of a friendly amendment. Would you like to make an amendment to the amendment? No. All right, Supervisor Elverman again is the only light that's on. Anyone else on this issue? I'm sorry, Vice Chairman Eckernes, my apologies.
My reading of this overtime provision is it applies to all the departments. You've got other departments that are involved as well, and it would affect the jail and the sheriff's department. And there is serious necessity sometimes to impose mandatory overtime to get the job done. We can't have employees arbitrarily saying, I'm not going to work. So there has to be mandatory overtime. I think that we're trying to micromanage the departments, that we rely on our department heads to make the correct judgments in operating their departments. I know there's not a lot of overtime required during the summer months. The winter months is when it is. But here a while back, we had a bad storm. There were a lot of trees that had to be cleaned up and things like that. You limit this thing to ice and snow, well, what about that? We have to get the county executive to issue an order to for the foreman out there to do what he should have the power to do right then and there without asking. I can't support that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Haas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this kind of goes down to the highway department. The way I look at that, they never had a problem in the past. Let's keep them happy and support this.
Thank you. Can I ask a clarification question? It was just referenced by the Vice Chairman, I believe, on the fact that this affects multiple departments. I guess this is a little bit off topic here. In the same overtime section, there is a italicized section that references a 5242 work schedule. Is that across all departments, or is it just for the jail? Why does it not say that specifically here? Because, I'm sorry, I missed that part. Okay, thank you. Supervisor, thank you, Supervisor Nero. Supervisor Elberman, again, you're the only one left. All right, no other lights on for the amendment. Roll call is requested. We're going to clarify the amendment one more time. Supervisor Singer, if you would read it, please. No changing it, by the way. I'm sorry, hold on. Go ahead.
Okay, section where it says such a request for overtime is considered voluntary except during emergency county county executive orders, and it is considered to be mandatory during snow and ice removal season for the county highway department employees.
All right, I'll allow the season addition. I also would like to ask you if you'll accept this clarification, just to be clear, declared county executive emergencies, or county executive declared emergencies.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Supervisor Clark, you have a point of
Just
order?
on the previous policy that we adopted, the temporary policy, it used the word overtime called for snow and ice control operations. I don't understand what the difference is, but that's the terminology that the administration utilizes. Is that a friendly amendment?
I would be fine with that instead of season, yes.
Okay.
You get all this, Edie? All right, I have lights on again. Supervisor Hallman, did you have discussion on this topic? Yes, sir.
Through the chair to Mr. Riedel, if he could. Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Riedel. How exactly would this amendment affect what administration's goal is?
Chairman Molinaro was correct when he described this as, in general, a mandatory overtime for all county employees. It's important to segregate the Sheriff's Department, and I think Supervisor Eckernis made the point better than I can. The Sheriff's Department already has mandatory overtime. It has to. The asterisk is simply to describe a change from 171 number 28 to the 5242, and I think you've already discussed that. What the proposal is attempting to do here is set an expectation level for our employees that they will be expected to work under extraordinary circumstances without management having to do what it did when we had collective bargaining agreements, and that was move up and down call-in lists to try and encourage people to come in for extraordinary circumstances. Clerical employees who work in the courts fall into a category where if you are a court clerk and the court case goes long beyond 5 o'clock, you will be expected to work overtime in that case and finish the case until your judge is done. Social workers presently may have to work at 6 o'clock at night because that's the only time a client is available. And all of these non-exempt employees get compensated for that. 5061 registered nurses have to work on Saturdays occasionally. That's a requirement. And so what we've done with this is attempt to establish with our employees an expectation that occasionally they will be expected to work overtime, and we will not run up and down a seniority list, or shouldn't have to, in order to get some folks to work. Now I want to clarify what is mandatory and what isn't mandatory overtime. Clearly, any horror story that was presented under any circumstances to any of you, which would somehow make you believe that an employee who was on vacation in Florida during an emergency would somehow be disciplined for not responding to an emergency, that's foolish. We don't manage that way. You don't want us to manage that way, and we won't do that. But the management of an emergency, the management of an urgent situation does require cooperative employees, and if they are hired as a condition of employment with the expectation that occasionally they will work overtime, then that will be achieved and be an improved management situation. So yes, this is intended to be for everyone. Segregating it by county executive declared emergency will eliminate the Sheriff's Department, which really has to have mandatory overtime as part of his operation. We'll segregate him out of that, and that I'm hopeful that you will consider as you go forward.
Thank you. Does that clarify the question?
It does. I'm certainly in favor of Supervisor Singer's amendment. I really wish when we made these things, coming in here, that we had them printed on a slip. I think the wording of this really does need to be separated, but I'm certainly in favor of its existence in this document. I don't know whether it would be best to work that with Corporation Counsel, whom I've seen has stepped out of the room, which happens whenever I speak, or with Mr. Riedel, but certainly this does need to be separated from this paragraph in some fashion. Thank you.
You're all so brutalized in this room. I've called on Supervisor Singer half a dozen times tonight. I don't call on him. Corp Counsel doesn't care for you. I'm not sure what right. Supervisor Elberman on the amendment. Vice Chairman Eckernis.
Yes, I heard, I think, a couple of employees yesterday talk about, where else do they have mandatory overtime? Does anybody have mandatory overtime? Well, I'm here to tell you that I started working when I was 11 years old. By the time I got out of high school and went into the workforce, I worked a number of places where we had mandatory overtime. I worked at American Motors, and at 3 o'clock, they come around and told us we're working until 6. On Friday, they come around and tell us you're working Saturday and Sunday. We didn't have the option of turning it down. There's mandatory overtime out there all over the place. Now, what's at issue here is whether or not you're going to give the supervisors that you depend on to get the job done the ability to get people into work when they're needed. Now, we also charge them with keeping down our costs. Overtime is a cost, so they don't take this lightly. We can't take away the ability to impose mandatory overtime. It's not going to get used that often, and I'm sure that they're not going to be using it to break up people's vacations and things like that. You know, I've had to go through this with the Sheriff's Department where you need somebody to work, so you start calling and you get turned down and turned down. Well, you can't, you know, you go to the end and nobody wants to work. Now what do? You have to call the first person you reach. You're working. And the same thing has to apply to the highway department and anywhere else if you're going to get the job done. We're here for the taxpayers, and the taxpayers deserve to have supervisors out there that will get the services out to them when it's needed, whatever that service is, whether it's to plow snow, salt, ice, or cut up a tree that's fallen across the road, or whatever. This isn't an unreasonable clause in here, not at all. This is something that's necessary for any business to run effectively, and this is a business. And don't vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Supervisor Arrington on the amendment.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Definitely, we don't want to affect. We don't want to run into a situation where we're not getting service in the county, and I don't know how I would do this. Would I need to make a friendly amendment to Supervisor Singer by saying that such a request for overtime is considered to be at the discretion of the managing department? So I think that would cover the Sheriff's Department. I mean, and that would give the departments, as you're saying, Supervisor Eckerness, the flexibility. If the managing departments require that it's mandatory, then the managing department has the discretion to not be limited in their power to be able to say, first 5 people that they call are the ones that need to report to do the snow plowing, the ice removal, et cetera. I don't know if I can make that friendly amendment or an amendment to the amendment. Maybe that's the verbiage we're looking for, to give them the flexibility just to say such a request for overtime is considered at the discretion of the managing department. I don't know how everybody, and that way it's not mandatory, but it gives the departments the flexibility to basically say whether it would be mandatory or not, and that would be up to the discretion and the nature of what's going on in the county in terms of snow and et cetera. Because you said to me that the Sheriff's Department has to have it, so, I mean, it's not going to ever apply to the Sheriff's Department, but it may apply to the Highways Department. So,
Recognizing that we're certainly being friendly here this evening, without some specific clarity as to where you want to change that language, unless the maker of the motion understands it, I would ask that you make an amendment to the amendment. Are you suggesting, and I don't want to get into nice here, but are you suggesting that you replace the county executive order with the discretion of the supervisor? I'm not clear, Supervisor Arrington.
I'm trying to understand well, I've heard 2 sides. I've heard that we don't want the mandatory overtime.
I know what you're looking for. I understand your point and your premise. I need to understand where that verbiage fits into what's been here, and if...
I would say in the last line where Supervisor Singer was speaking, such a request for overtime will be considered at the discretion of the managing department. I mean, I've heard arguments that we don't want to micromanage them, so give the department the power and discretion to make their own decisions.
All right, is that a motion?
Yes.
Point of clarification, that's 1 sentence up. Isn't that what that says, 1 sentence up, unless I'm misguided? Occasionally, as employee supervisor will make every effort. I mean, that's already in there. I think what Supervisor Arrington is asking for is already the policy that's being presented by administration. And I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
All right, I understand your point. Before you is a motion to amend the amendment by Supervisor Arrington.
Can I say one thing there? Sure. Well, then, I make a motion to, we can eliminate the sentence. That's a good point by Supervisor Gantz. Eliminate such a request for overtime to be considered voluntary or mandatory, because we've already spelled it out in the above sentence.
All right, so your amendment to the amendment, then, is to strike everything after the word notice, period.
Yep.
Is there a second to that amendment? Is there a second to the amendment by Supervisor Arrington? Is there a second to the amendment? The amendment fails for lack of a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Jeff Gentz, you asked for a point of clarification. You were next on the board. Either way, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Vice Chair Eckerness on this. This is probably the most eloquent that he has spoke. I agree with you. First of all, if you're going to do something like this, you should separate it out with the different departments if that's what you want to do. And that would totally, mess up the intent of what's going on here. I think we ought to leave it the way it is. I don't perceive it as a problem. And I think we should not micromanage this and allow the supervisors and the people that are there that do need to get the jobs done the latitude to do that. So I will not be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Michael.
I am in support of the amendment. Clearly, I believe that our employees are not going to leave the county high and dry. I mean, I don't believe that there's going to be an issue with the highway department. These are smart individuals. We've never had problems with them showing up for work or being there when they know that the storm is on the way. These are individuals that reside in our community. They're going to look out for the best interests of our community. I don't believe that you need to have this policy with a mandatory overtime. I believe the amendment is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Michael. Supervisor Singer on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as the overtime, the only problem that the administration experienced was with the highway department, and they needed that in order for the snow and ice removal, and that's why I put that in. I also put in the county executive issuing the order so that it gives the flexibility so that if it is needed, they're able to do whatever they need to do. So that flexibility still is there. The county exec just has to say that he needs that flexibility. That's all it is. So they can do their jobs. Yeah, I'm not making it super easy for them just to call, not to have to call anybody. Just tell people that are standing next to them. But maybe they need to do their jobs. You know, they have a job to do. They need to do it. We don't take it out on the backs of the workers. This is what they asked for, and this is what I think that will solve the problem. We haven't had any problems since we had it in the temporary policy, and I think it should be a pretty much slam dunk here just to get this taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Haas on the amendment.
I'd like to make an amendment to read that overtime shall be voluntary. It should be by seniority. If nobody volunteers for it, the least senior person would have to work. So if they need, let's say, 5 people in the sheriff department.
Okay, don't debate it.
Okay.
Well, no, you said I want to make a motion, so I'm accepting that.
I'm trying to clarify what I mean, though.
I understand that. Go ahead.
Okay. Say the highway department needs 6 people to plow snow. They go by the highest seniority. If everybody says no, the 5 least senior employees shall be mandatory overtime then. It should be forced in.
All right, if I can try to clarify this. You were making a motion that
that overtime shall be
overtime
voluntary.
shall be considered voluntary by seniority. If no one volunteers, the lowest seniority employee will be
forced. Correct.
Is there a second to the amendment made by Supervisor Haas? Is there a second to the amendment to the amendment? Is there a second? The amendment to the amendment by Supervisor Haas fails for lack of a second. Anything else, sir? No. Supervisor Clark.
Just trying to clear up the Sheriff's Department issue, and I have a thought of an amendment or a friendly amendment. In that overtime, that first paragraph, leaving Supervisor Singer's such request overtime, that whole, what he had down in the bottom, but except for the Sheriff's Department, and starting except for the Sheriff's Department, comma, and then we go forward, and then below that paragraph, another line, Sheriff's Department overtime is considered mandatory. So start the paragraph, except for the Sheriff's Department. We leave Supervisor Singer's amendment as it is.
So you're saying, except for the Sheriff's Department, such a request for overtime?
I was going to go do it at the beginning of the paragraph, except for the Sheriff's Department, comma, when business or department conditions require, employees may need, and then it comes down to that point. We leave Supervisor Singer's amendment intact. We go to the next, almost the next paragraph that happens to be one line or however they want to fit it in there, that it says the Sheriff's Department overtime is mandatory.
Supervisor Singer is indicating he is okay with that friendly amendment.
Thank you. Sheriff, you have an issue with that?
Is there a request through the chair of the sheriff?
Yes, please. Sorry about that. I forgot where I'm sitting.
The paragraph.
Former chairman of the Finance Administration Committee has a question for the sheriff.
Mr. Chairman and County Board Supervisors, I'd be happy to answer. The overtime is, Supervisor Eckern said, the Sheriff's Department lives by mandatory overtime. We try our best to accommodate posting of overtime and make it so it isn't forced all the time. And we do pretty well at that, but there are times when we definitely have to make it mandatory overtime. And making it mandatory overtime, the paragraph as it states right now, if you wanted to leave that just like it is for the Sheriff's Department and move to something else, to the Highway Department, I'm certainly not going to speak for the Highway Department of what works or what doesn't, but the paragraph as it is right now works. And if you create overtime as the overtime assigned as mandatory, what we do allow is if I get stuck with forced overtime, mandatory overtime, I'm allowed to ask, I got to go pick up my kids today. I can actually ask another correctional officer to take my mandatory overtime today and work that, even though tomorrow I might get stuck with it tomorrow, but today I can't. So to change things and truly make it mandatory may work against our ability to be flexible with our employees. If you leave it like it is right now for the Sheriff's Department, and I'll only speak for the Sheriff's Department, we're okay with that.
I believe that is what the friendly amendment that's been accepted does.
And that's,
from
if you leave it like it is, I'm good.
Supervisor Clark.
From the Chairman of the Finance and Administration Committee to the Chairman of the Board to the Sheriff. Perhaps that extra line, rather than saying the Sheriff's Department is mandatory, Sheriff Department overtime is at the discretion of the Sheriff.
Fine.
Again, maker of the amendment is nodding his agreement on the friendly amendment. Anything else, Supervisor Clark?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Eckerness.
You know there's more than 2 departments in the county. What if a pipe breaks in this building and it's going to require a massive cleanup and it's outside of regular work hours? Now we got to get the county executive to declare an emergency so that you can tell a custodian to come in and clean up this mess. Yeah, especially if it's in the court. He's in the basement now, you know. That's where all the water goes. You know, a highway supervisor determines that there's a need. So he's got to call, his boss has got to call the county exec and tell the county exec, we got an emergency. The county exec don't know there's an emergency except for the guy out there that sees it. let the guy out there that sees it make a determination and get people into work instead of all this screwing around to get the county exec's approval. He don't belong in this unless it's a massive storm that's being, predicted and going on. I think leave well enough alone. Leave the language the way it is. Trust your supervisory staff to do the job and do the job right and treat the employees right. If there's a problem with supervisors being overbearing or unreasonable in that, we can deal with that. We can do those difficult things. But this will cause us more problems than maybe an employee complaining that he was made to work on a night that he didn't want to because the supervisor couldn't find anybody. Nobody else was dumb enough to answer the phone. We got this guy. We tell him to come in. This is how you have to run a business sometimes. Don't vote for any amendments here.
Thank you. Supervisor Decker.
Question for the chair, Mr. Riedel. Yes.
I don't want his job.
So if we approve this amendment, and in the courthouse we have a clerk, and this is after all contracts are done, so like 2013, we have a clerk that the judge is going past 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whatever time is normal closing time. Can that clerk leave because she's not required to stay?
Presently, we have language in the contract that would require her to stay.
But once the contract is done,
Well, it would,
if this were changed,
I believe the amendment would make it voluntary on her part. I mean, as I read this.
so if like Supervisor Eckert stated, if an employee was cleaning up a burst pipe and it came 5 o'clock and that's his normal quitting time, he could just up and leave because he's not required to do overtime?
Could.
In theory?
In theory.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Elberman, you getting the itch yet? Perfect. Supervisor O'Day is off the board, as is whomever else just turned off. So we do not appear to have any other lights. I'm going to roll call requested. I'm going to do my I'm going to do my best to reiterate this amendment. Paragraph number 1 under Section 2 overtime will start out, except for the Sheriff's Department, when business or department conditions require, etc. The last sentence, current last sentence says, such a request for overtime is considered, will be amended here to read, will be considered, or is considered voluntary, except during county executive declared emergencies, at which time overtime will be mandatory, inclusive of snow and ice control operations. There'll be an additional sentence added that states, Sheriff's Department overtime is at the discretion of the sheriff. Anybody disagree with that? Do you have a question, Supervisor Hallman? Don't be bashful.
Have we called for the vote officially?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm asking if you have a question on my verbiage. Oh, okay. All right. Unless there's questions on my verbiage, that's the way it stands. So, the amendment before you is as read. If you're in favor, P and plus. If you're opposed, P and minus. The amendment passes 16 to 11. All right. So, the budget has currently been amended to include this overtime language. Next issue, Supervisor Elberman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assure this will not be confusing, and I don't think there'll be amendments to it. I'd like to make an amendment to the budget that would remove the proposed in-range adjustment for the Gulf General Manager.
Motion made by Supervisor Elberman to remove the in-line adjustment for the Director of Operations within the Gulf. Seconded by Supervisor Hallman. Supervisor Elberman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that'd be for the Gulf GM, General Manager. There's numerous reasons for this. If you walk out of this room, although I've heard some crazy things here this evening also, but if you walk out of this room, I don't think you'll find a soul, at least I haven't, that would say that we should give raises to anybody in our Gulf Division at this time. I may be a little bit closer to this than most, because after the years, people know that I'm involved in that. And I do hear quite a bit. Some of you may hear nothing. But the average person walking the street in Kenosha County or playing the golf courses in Kenosha County knows our financial situation. We have made advances, and we've had setbacks in golf. I've been involved in this operation now for most of the time I've been on the county board. At the beginning, we were flowing in money. We could buy equipment that we needed. We could make repairs. We had people running the golf course that just moved their way up from working for the Parks Department or the Highway Department. It was an easy breezy situation. Things have changed. We've gone from losing $600,000 a year to $350,000, back to $400,000, back to $300,000, and this year we're projected between $200,000 and $280,000. There's things that people on the county board have done to enhance this operation. One is hiring a grounds manager that has made major advances from what we've heard and seen, especially in the Carthage presentation that we're all going to see on the 18th. My point here in this in-range adjustment for the Gulf General Manager is that it is not the time for anyone to get a raise when we're still losing in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. The person that was hired did receive in his first year a $5,000, or I think it's the exact amount that this that this raise is projected at $5,100 something for a construction project that ran simultaneously with the same raise for the ground superintendent that also ran the construction project. That's how it was brought in the first year of their employment. Second year of their employment, we did give the raise to the grounds employee because of the conditions of the golf course. And what we told the golf general manager was a couple things, that if we hit some goals and we improve here, that naturally his wages would also rise. I don't think we've hit that point yet. And for someone that is a strong advocate for the golf operation, it's very difficult to say this. I'm saying it because the average person, when I walk out of this door, and every one of you, if there's 28 of us here and there's 27 of us, if you ask someone, if you don't bring it up, you might not hear about it. But for an operation that's still losing money, no matter how hard they're working, it's just not something that I can vote for. I wanted to bring this up, remove it, so that I could speak on it, and hopefully get some support. I know that at the Finance Committee there was some goals that were achieved that were brought up. Well, if I go to my bank and borrow $100,000 because I'm $100,000 in debt, and the next year I'm only $97,000 in debt and I want another 100, I haven't really reached my goal until I pay them back the 100. So if you reach 96% of your goals, if you set your goals low enough, it's easy to do. When I began here, we were at $3.5 million in revenue for the golf. Now we're hitching down to 2.2 something for this year. It's not the time to give raises. I think everyone that works there is doing a good job. More needs to be done. And I think to fend off the comments I'm sure I'm going to get that it's such a small item, it's not that important. Say that to the taxpayers tomorrow. I hope at least this gets printed in the paper and your vote gets seen by the taxpayer. I urge your support in this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Clark on the amendment.
There are certainly things that have been out of the control of the golf manager, and I'm not going to use weather as one, but I don't recall ever holding it against the superintendent of highways when we ran out of salt because we had too much snow. You know, I mean, we're not going to, it's out of his control that we had a bunch of storms, the superintendent of highway. We're blowing our health insurance budget because there's a lot of claims. I don't hear anybody wanting to go after someone in personnel because we've blown that too. I think the golf operation has made continuous steps in the right direction. He has brought leagues in. He's dealt with a year that's had construction in front of that shop all the way through. I'm not supporting this because he failed. I'm not supporting this because he's gotten close. I'm looking at this from a compression standpoint and a management standpoint. And I'm also looking at this, like it or not, from the words that our county executive gave to this gentleman when he hired him. And I think the county executive had a choice as to where he was going to start him out. Told him that if you do certain things, I will I will give you a raise. Not recommend a raise, because I think the county executive didn't understand at the time that he had to go through this process. I don't look at it as a small amount. Certainly, there are a lot of employees. Take a look at the in-range adjustments and the things that we're doing. Take a look at all the non-reps and everybody that are going to get an adjustment here. Those adjustments are also being made partly because of compression. Because of our non-rep policy, we let things get out of whack, and we've got it to where now we've got to do all of this stuff. So I'm supporting this because the manager of that operation should be at a higher compensation, than the people he's managing. Even though I just think it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gilgans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be voting against this amendment. We did set out goals. I think it was pretty clear last year at our meeting when this money was taken away from this person, and he did put goals together for 2011. In all of those categories where he put his goals together, he was in the over 90 to 98 percentile of reaching those goals, even though there were several impediments this year that he had to deal with, as I said, the road construction, et cetera. He was able to reduce some salaries with the retirement of 2 union workers. He put in the Chrome system, the automated timekeeping system, which has been installed and is now operational, which gives him a better management tool to utilize the staffing levels out there. He's looking for a better margin of profitability management with the new management system that has been put in. He was able to organize and host a Wisconsin State Golf Association event, and he was also able to organize and host a Wisconsin PGA event. And those were all of his goals from last year, so he has been able to accomplish a lot of the goals that he set for himself, as well as for the county. So at this time, again, I will be not supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose.
I'm convinced that nobody can make money or even break even with the golf course situation at 45 holes. It's just too big. If you want to break even or if you want to make money, you're going to have to reduce the size of the operation. I don't care who you're going to bring in there as the general manager. I don't believe it's possible in this economy. There's not that kind of demand for golf. There's tremendous amount of competition in southeastern Wisconsin and northern Illinois, and if your expectation is that the manager is going to be able to make this a break-even or a profit-making operation, your expectations are unrealistic. I believe the Finance Committee supported the proposition here based upon the fact that the manager was making less than the person that he was supervising. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the time I've been on the county board, the majority of that I've spent with some direct involvement with the golf situation. I also sit on the Finance Committee, so I've heard various comments upon this during the past several weeks. The fact of the matter is, before this person's arrival at Kenosha County, we did not have a very good handle, I would say, on the expense side of the golf operation, specifically labor. So since Mr. Dreyer has arrived, it's more than apparent to myself, and I think the majority of the committee members, both on the golf committee and on the Finance Committee, that this is one area where Mr. Dreyer has really taken the lead, and we're doing much better controlling our expenses. Any business entity is not in a static state. You're either doing better and you're coming closer to profitability, or you're going away from profitability. Even though we've not achieved profitability, we are having less debt. We are getting closer to the goal of being self-sustained. So that being said, I could not support this amendment. It was not supported in the committee that oversees golf. It was not supported in the administration. I would encourage your rejection of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Eckerness.
I'm finishing my 10th year on a county board now, and I've never seen this happen before, where you go after one employee to hold their salary down. It just it doesn't sit right with me. The committee did vote to give this person a raise after he was held down for a couple of years, and I can't support this amendment.
Thank you. No other light. Do quick, Supervisor O'Day.
I won't repeat everybody else's thing, but I can't support it either. Thank you.
Roll call requested. Amendment before you is the elimination of the salary increase for the general manager of the golf operation. P and plus if you're in favor of the amendment to exclude the increase. P and minus if you're not in favor of the amendment. Motion fails 22-5. All right, if you're keeping score, we have the only amendment that is passed at this point in time is the overtime amendment. We're all in agreement? Seeing no other lights on the board. Imagine that. Supervisor Clark.
I have one more amendment. As you know, I proposed a position for the county board. I'm not going to propose that position for the county board. I know how to count. However, I believe it's important for the county board to have the ability to retain professionals. I thought I read that was an alternative by in one of the commentaries given us at DART. That from time to time, maybe the county board may need to retain an outside professional to do some analysis, independent of the administration or independent of having to go to the administration to ask if you can do something. We adopt the budget. We give the county executive the marching orders, and we have no authority really to spend. When we got into this waste of money or lawsuit on redistricting, certainly we had dollars in the budget, professional services in the budget that we authorized, but we had to go to the executive and really ask for permission to engage an attorney. That was one route. He agreed to it. Or the other route is we'd have to bring it to the county board, have a budget resolution, have a two-thirds vote to modify the budget. Tonight we saw here the administration hired a professional to make their point relative to the type of health insurance we had at their discretion to educate us. And I think there was a paper that was issued, an education for the county board or something like that. So my proposal, and I'm not going to be here to see the benefits of this, but I think it's important that you at least have that ability. Number one, this amendment, I have to say it in two parts because it affects the resolution. Number one, in the county executive's budget, there's $120,000 for professional services. And a county executive has not typically used all of that, but he has it available at his discretion to take on special projects. I think the county board, in their wisdom, should have the discretion to take on special projects. So I want to amend the budget to reduce the county budget's the county executive's professional services down from $120,000 to $70,000, and I want to increase the professional services in the county board budget by $50,000. So going 120, we're subtracting 50, we're down to 70 in the county exec, we're at 50 in the county board. Now it comes down to the authorization to spend. In the resolution, a whereas that says, whereas from time to time the county board may be required to retain outside professional service to assist in their analysis of issues they face. And then in the now therefore, the county board appropriates $50,000 into professional services. Those funds may only be expended by a majority vote of the executive committee. That's my amendment.
Motion made by Clark, seconded by Decker. To paraphrase, this is to reduce the county executive's professional services budget from $120,000 to $70,000, increase the county board's professional services line item or add one, I guess, to $50,000, and it would modify the budget, the policy resolution that gives the county board the authorization to spend only with majority vote of the executive committee.
And then if it comes down to the county executive and his line item or his budget, if he needs more money, similar to the conversation we had with the corporation counsel when we were questioning whether he had enough legal fees, the county executive, the corporation counsel, or any other department that is coming back without appropriate funds can come to the county board and ask for a budget amendment.
Probably not any discussion on that, is there? Supervisor Noble on the amendment. Supervisor Grady on the amendment.
More of a point of information to whoever would be qualified to respond to the chair. I have heard various accounts and stories that in the past that the county board has been able to retain independent analysis of county affairs, and that's even been a part of past budgets. If someone can address that and speak to that, please.
I can speak to the fact that the county board at one point in time, this goes back to when we were before we became an executive form of government, had a position in the budget. That was a county board staff position, for lack of a better way to put it. Over the years, that position was cut down, not eliminated initially, but reduced to whatever level, and then ultimately eliminated. Beyond that, I can't comment. I don't know if Mr. Riedel has anything to add to that.
I'm looking for approximate time frame when this was happening. What years are we looking at approximately?
I believe the ultimate elimination, and someone on this board can correct me, or Mr. Geertsen, I don't know if you know anything about this. I believe the ultimate elimination was during my tenure on the county board, but again, I could be wrong on that.
Well, I'd like Mr. Geertsen's recollections then, please.
I recall the dollars being reprogrammed to fund a human services program, and that motion was made when we were still using the county board or the courthouse to have committee meetings on the first floor there, which was before 1995. So this was over a decade and a half ago that those dollars were eliminated.
Does that answer your question?
That answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Grady's question was the timing. It was his understanding that the county board had the authority to
Past. We had a person in that position in the past.
correct. He was asking about whether or not the county board had the ability previously to seek outside counsel, and I know that we had a position in the budget.
This is not about adding a position in the budget.
Understand that.
And without a budget line item in that information resolution, the county board has no authority to spend.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose on the amendment.
Thank you. I'm going to oppose the amendment. I don't think we've thought about this enough. We're taking a substantial amount of money and moving it from the executive's budget to the board's budget to fund something that's unknown. I'd like to know what the problem is here. Have we been hamstringed in attempting to hire somebody and inability to do so? This has not come up. If we feel we need to hire an expert, we can do that. We need a consultant for something. There's money available for that. And I think it needs to have a substantial consensus of this board to do so, and I'm very troubled by reposing this authority in the executive committee. I don't know who this is going to be or what the situation is going to be, but I'm confident that if a substantial majority, a supermajority, can amend this budget at any time and move money around from the current budget or the general fund to hire people, obtain consultants, to give us advice on something that we really need advice on. I understand and appreciate what Supervisor Clark is trying to do here. I think the intent is good, that we have the ability to retain advisors on different things that is necessary. But we do have that authority, and we just need to use that authority and persuade the board that we need to exercise that authority, that it's something important enough to do so. I would hate to see a substantial amount put in our budget and have that wasted, and the executive have the inability in certain situations to retain experts for whatever purposes there are to accomplish the mandates that we've set forth in the budget that we're passing here this evening of over $204 million. So I'm going to oppose the proposition.
Thank you. Supervisor Noble still holding, correct? Supervisor Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not in favor of this, but I do have a question first and then a comment. So through the chair to the chairman of Finance and Administration, could you perhaps give us, in theory, with whom and for what purpose we might utilize this?
I don't know that there's a with whom and what purpose. The dollar amount that is in the county executive's budget is subject to the same question, with whom and what purpose. It's at the discretion. There is an unknown situation that may or may not arise. You may not spend this. And Supervisor Rose is right. You could always come in and make an amendment at the board should you choose. As I look at the larger counties or the counties that could be comparable, they have staff positions. I'm not looking to do that. But as I look at some of the criticisms that have been out there, they say from time to time, the county board, maybe they can retain consultants. I don't know that you're going to have a need or not. The county executive hasn't spent to that level that's in his budget, but continues to leave it in there just in case something comes up. It's somewhat the same scenario, giving the county board that ability. That's my intent. Again, I won't be here to see it one way or the other. I just think it's a good policy or a good tool for the county board.
when this was proposed in the executive committee in another fashion. I was in favor of it then because I'm a great lover of data and I enjoy seeing how things operate. I like taking things apart and putting them back together and seeing how they work. I have a number of concerns about this proposal. Chiefly among them, I can't speak directly to the way the county executive operates in his capacity, but certainly in ours, we do and are provided a number of third-party analyses, studies, proposals, and recommendations, and some supervisors read them more than others. And so I would be leery, perhaps, of giving us this kind of latitude. Thank you.
No other lights on the amendment. Roll call is requested before you is the amendment as stated, which is to transfer $50,000 from the county executive's budget to the county board with the appropriate language in the policy resolution. P and plus if you're in favor, P and opposed if you're minus if you're opposed. Motion fails, 16 to 11. Supervisor Noble.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment, but possibly I can save some debate if I ask a question of Mr. Riedel for some clarification. But when I was chairman of the administration committee before the administration committee and the finance committee merged, the hot topic was the post-retirement employee benefits, OPEB. You've heard me talk about that before when I was chairman. There's I believe a $90 million liability out there if we continue to go with status quo with what we're doing now with employees being able to retire at, with 15 years of continuous county employment, and at 60 years old they can basically get free health insurance. And I have thought about putting in an amendment to address that tonight. I thought that it was going to be addressed in this budget, so I guess I need an explanation to Bob Riedel. When will it be addressed, or what's the plan for addressing the post-retirement employee benefits?
We did a fair amount of work on OPEB liability in preparation for this budget. In fact, the county executive was very much involved and interested in finding an effective way to begin the process of reducing that liability, exactly what you had talked about earlier. It was the collective decision of all of us that it required an in-depth analysis, and so we are going to embark on an in-depth analysis of how best to reduce that benefit, understanding that some of our employees are counting on that benefit in the not-too-distant future to retire, and then to gradually eliminate it through some coordinated system that we all can agree on is the right way to treat the employees who are kind of in the queue to retire, and then reduce that liability and permanently remove it from the benefit package for county government. And so that will require an analysis of the finance division, the personnel division, and in particular the Milliman Corporation, who is the county's actuary. We will report that then to the county executive, who clearly will have ultimate approval, and bring it back likely early next year.
So we'll address that in the 2013 budget?
It's the exec's budget, and I won't speak to him, but clearly it will be prepared for him to consider in 2012.
Well, I do have an amendment, but I am willing then to wait until the 2013 budget, as I will wait for the employee participation in contributions in the 2013 budget.
Can I make one more point? I'm sorry to do this to you. The policies that you passed does have a statement in there that says employees hired starting on January 1st, 2012 do not get that benefit.
Doesn't it just say non-rep employees, though?
No, all employees. All employees. Now, new employees will not qualify for that benefit.
But that's a minimal. Put your finger in a tight.
It's a baby step. Totally. We'll take it forward from there.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Zerban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to look for some clarification on the overtime policy. I thought when we had previously approved the interim policies that the employees covered by law enforcement exemption, that we were not going to be implementing the 171 hours for a 28-day period. I thought that we were going to be going with a 40-hour, anything over 40-hour work week. So I have a question in our overtime policy regarding that. I don't know if this is best directed to the sheriff.
Temporary policy was passed exclusive of the 171. It came forward from the administration with this budget with the 171 reinserted. The Finance Administration, in fact, took that out again. So it is in line with what was passed as a temporary policy a few months back. State your point.
The 171 is in the budget, and it has always been our policy. We just have never followed it, and that is what ultimately saved us in the Kelly Day lawsuit, if I am correct, because we had it. However, we paid at the 40 hours. Now we are doing this. What is it? 5-4 or
5-2-4-2.
5-2-4-2. And that's kind of, they're going to do that and use that to figure out the overtime. Maybe it would be appropriate to have Mr. Riedel or the sheriff explain that, but it is in there for technical purposes, legal purposes. However, they're not following it through 2012. They're telling us they're going to use this other scheduling model.
Mr. Riedel, you want to elaborate on that?
The 171 over 28 proposal that was in this policies saves a significant amount of money for the county, and that's pretty much why it was implemented. Supervisor Clark is right. It has always existed as an overarching policy for overtime for the Sheriff's Department, and it did save us significantly on the Kelly Day. Understanding that 990J preferred the over 40 that was passed and amended in the interim policy, the Sheriff went to work on an alternative schedule which would create the same level of savings as the 171 over 28 implementation. The Finance Division, Mr. Gertzen, Mr. Schwartz, myself, and others analyzed 5242 from their perspective, agreed it was financially comparable, and in fact has the potential to be more financially beneficial. And so we amended these policies through the Finance Admin Committee to allow for a one-year trial on the 5242, and if it works, then we'll put it in for a longer period of time. We want to see if it works, if it saves the overtime, if it's a good alternative to the 171/28. We would still keep that as the overarching policy, but 5242 would be the accepted schedule of the Sheriff's Department. Did you want to add?
Just I still have the question, are we following the 171 or are we following the 40?
Mike.
40? That's what I understood.
So it will be the policy that anything over 40 hours is going to be paid as overtime?
Yes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Kohlmeyer.
I'd like to propose an amendment back to the golf department to reduce the salaries temporary by $100,000 and the revenue by $100,000 for green fees.
There's an amendment proposed, moved by Supervisor Kohlmeyer to reduce temporary salaries by $100,000, correspondingly revenues by $100,000. Second by Supervisor Decker, so we can hear more.
Yeah, my reasoning behind this, I think, as somebody just pointed out with the golf manager, he's not set up for success. If we talked about, we've lost $300,000 in 2010. We're projected to lose about $200,000 this year. I think the county exec's done a good job of reducing some expenses. But if you look at the budget, I think we're still looking at a $100,000 shortfall in the budget. And I think the Carthage group did an excellent job with that report. I read that report this weekend. They brought up a lot of great suggestions. One of the main things which Supervisor Rose talked about was about the capacity of holes, that we have too many. I know that's a big decision to make right now as far as the number of holes. So another thing that they pointed out in the report was the level of maintenance costs have skyrocketed, that we're over-maintaining our holes. And I think a short-term solution right now to possibly close the golf shortfall this year would be, what if we don't necessarily have to lay anybody off, what if we take our temporary maintenance and just maintain it less? And I think we potentially set it up for success.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Clark.
What page is that on in the budget?
What page? 68? Thank you. 68.
And what line item you're proposing that adjustment to? I think, I believe that is our seasonal employees. 67. Those are our seasonal employees. And that is the move that we've been trying to make, to go from permanent employees to seasonal employees that you are paying. They're probably the lowest paid employees in the county, getting your biggest, I don't want to say biggest bang for your buck in the wrong way, but you're getting a lot of hours. And there is golf course maintenance that needs to be done. I would be opposed to this adjustment because that's been somewhat of the shift to get cost in control. We still have to maintain that golf course. If you're going to have that be the product that you are going to deliver and attract and retain your customers, I would be opposed to that. I think that there will be some very serious discussion over the winter to do something with the Red 9 that they're talking about is about a $100,000 hit. They just didn't want a knee-jerk reaction to that decision in the budget, but the executive and the administration is very well aware of that. And you take some minor changes and you get rid of $100,000 there next year, we could be very close to break even.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whether we like it or not, for the foreseeable future, we are in the golf business. We're taking a look at necessary ability to maintain the courses, to generate any kind of revenue, whatever. When you take a look at this particular line item, and I can understand Supervisor Kohlmeyer's intent here, when you take a look at this line item, you would be basically cutting out the most cost-effective maintenance you have on the county courses. So if you're going to be in the golf business, you want to maintain them, you want to get some revenue through your gates, you really want to take advantage of these people, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but you want to take financial advantage of using your most cost-effective employees, which are not employees which will be there year-round, will be there just when they're needed for the season. So, again, I can appreciate the intent, but from a business standpoint, this would be a less than desirable outcome. It would really make the situation less desirable than the one that we're in, so I would encourage you not to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Ellerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said earlier, since I've been on the county board, I've been around this operation, and the knee-jerk reaction to pull 100 and stick 100 is not a wise move. I certainly would not support that. We all will have some time to look at this golf operation. I'm hoping that people are actually taking this seriously this time. But to do this knee-jerk this evening is not a wise move. You've heard the basic reasons that these are our most cost-effective moves. We've moved into this.
Supervisor.
A knee-jerk reaction to pull 100 and stick 100 is not a wise move. I certainly would not support that. We all will have some time to look at this golf operation. I'm hoping that people are actually taking this seriously this time. But to do this knee-jerk this evening is not a wise move. You've heard the basic reasons that these are our most cost-effective moves. We've moved into this. Part-time employees, the only way that they are kicking us, and we weren't able to attack this year, we were trying to cut down on the unemployment, which did not work. But they are still the most cost-effective employees to have compared to what we had in the past. So I would not support this amendment either. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose.
If you have a good manager at this golf course, you're going to lose maybe $200,000. If you have a bad manager, you lose maybe $200,000 to $300,000. It's too big. That's the bottom line. You're putting a person in there and you're setting them up to fail. Tell me what golf course, what country club in the country has 45 holes? Nobody has this. It's just not possible to run. And this is not that difficult to understand. If you wanted to do something, this report should have been implemented in this budget. But if you want to run 45 holes, you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have the necessary staff to do so. And just hold your point. I'll be finished in a minute. You can speak. I didn't interrupt you. Don't interrupt me.
State your point, Supervisor Haas.
Are we talking about holes, or what are we talking about here?
Supervisor Rose is very much on point with this discussion.
Okay.
And that's coming from me. Supervisor Rose.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
The only criticism I have of the report, it doesn't go far enough. You eliminate 9 holes, as has been pointed out, you're closer to break even. That isn't going to do it either. So we've decided, the board has decided to go with 45 holes, then spend the money. You have no choice. You can eliminate the $100,000 now, as is suggested, but you'll be adding it out of the general fund at the end of the year because it's got to be maintained. It's that simple.
Thank you. Let's try to stay focused here for a little bit longer. Supervisor Celebree.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Thanks for that.
I've been Supervisor Gail Gintz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would totally agree with Supervisor Clark and Supervisor Elverman. This was the goal, to eliminate the high-paying positions that we had that were cutting grass for $60,000 to $70,000 a year and replace those with temporary employees who obviously work from the time the golf course opens in the spring until the time it closes in the fall. And those are just part-time jobs, and those are the jobs that this line item covers. So to cut those positions would just not make any sense whatsoever. So I would definitely oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor... All right, someone was up there. Nobody? All right, seeing no other lights, roll call, I'm assuming, is requested. If you're in favor of the reduction of $100,000 in temporary salaries in the golf division, P and plus. If you're opposed, the amendment, P and minus. Motion fails 26-1. I think, is that? No, that's right, 27. Okay. I have a couple of lights on yet. Let me see who it is. Supervisor Decker.
I'd like to propose an amendment to add, be it further resolved that the Human Services Department review with Human Services Committee, Public Welfare Committee, and Finance Committee all human services programs and report on the effectiveness and cost benefits of human services programs. And if additional resources are needed to accomplish said review, the department and committee will report back to the county board and county executive before the 2013 budget.
The way you just stated that, all you want them to do is report back to the county board and the county executive that they need funding prior to the 2013 budget. So if you are looking for a report to be here prior to that, you may want to clarify that. Follow me?
No, say that again, I'm sorry.
Well, you read your amendment, and then you said, and if it is determined that they need funding to get the report completed, they should report that to the county board and the county executive prior to the 2013 budget. Do you want to just know that they need help, or do you want to have the report?
No, the report on the effectiveness and cost benefits of human services programs. I would like that report before the 2013 budget.
Perfect. I'm just making sure it's clear. Is there a second to that amendment? Is there a second to Supervisor Decker's amendment about a report on human services programs? Is there a second motion? Supervisor Elverman, so close. Supervisor Decker.
This comment or this item was in last year's budget and was supposed to be done, and we never received this information this year. And I would like to receive this information, and I believe putting it in the budget with an actual timeline on it, we might actually get the information before the budget next year.
You're correct. It was discussed during the 2011 budget debate. Supervisor O'Day on the issue? On the amendment? No? Supervisor Jeff Gentz on the amendment?
Through the chair to the maker of the motion, you want reports on every program, every department. What is it exactly that you're looking for? I mean, you want to dive in? Last year, I think it was about contracts. You're not talking about reviewing every program that's affiliated with Human Services and getting a report on it, are you?
We haven't even gotten any information aside from what the RFP process is in the Human Services Committee. That's the only information we've gotten. And what members last year wanted was information on the effectiveness. The Human Services portion of the county budget is the largest portion of the budget. Excuse me. And we don't know the effectiveness of these programs that we're spending all this money on.
Okay. Through the chair of the Human Services, I've asked for reports from divisions, and we've been getting those. And through that, I'm getting a better understanding of where we need to spend money and how the programs are working. I believe if this came up last year, I voted against it, and I'll vote against it now. At some point, we pay administrators, managers, department heads to manage. I don't, while I understand it's a huge part of our budget, I don't know that you want to have them spending their time generating a report for us on the impact and the financial goings-on of the department like that. They get into that type of detail. I mean, I think if we hear reports from the divisions and departments, we can assess their effectiveness, where they need money, how their progress on certain things that we've asked them to do, such as Brookside, are going. But I just feel that is a little bit of micromanagement in a department that's already a behemoth in the county. I mean, that's really hard for them to do, to take the time to do that. I'm not going to support that. Thank you.
Supervisor Clark.
We discussed this in Finance Committee, and we opted to leave it out because I believe Ms. Staves represented that there's going to be a report issued, I believe, in the first quarter of next year. So we at that point.
It appears as though it's going to be provided in the fourth quarter of this year, which would give us a month and a half to do that. So a lot of heads nodding yes.
Yeah, and I thought it was January. So in any event, it's going to be coming forth in near order.
Supervisor Arrington on the issue, on the amendment?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, several of my questions got answered, but I guess it's not that I want to defend Human Services. I serve on the committee and I serve on the board, and Human Services is more than cooperative with giving us the information that we need to make our decisions in terms of their finances and how they're spent and their programs. I'm not going to support this because we've never had a problem in the past with Human Services getting back to us in a timely manner. I think the example was used by Supervisor Jeff Gantz that, like with Brookside, we are continually monitoring the Medicaid issue, the private pay issue, et cetera, and they're providing that kind of information to us. Human Services is just too big for us to break them down like that into small micromanagement style situations. So I will not be supporting that, and I just think that they're already doing what we've asked them to do. And if anyone objects to that, I challenge them to say what they're not doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor O'Day on the issue, on the amendment?
The chair to John Jansen, the director, if I may.
Sure. Mr. Jansen.
It may be only part of what she's looking for, but are we not having a meeting next Wednesday on all the contracts?
Yes, Human Services Board will be reviewing all of our contracts and receiving the information. We'll also be in front of Public Welfare Committee on Thursday the 17th and Human Service Committee on November 22nd.
So I invite anybody on the county board to Wednesday night, 5 o'clock, in the Human Services Building, 8500 Sheridan Road. You'll learn about contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Hallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try not to repeat what a number of my colleagues have said. I'm not in favor of this amendment at all. Putting some of my sociological background to work here, there's a number of areas that are non-financial in human services in terms of sociological theory, psychological theory, in terms of determining the effectiveness of those programs. Many of our members here on the county board have small businesses, and it comes in handy when dealing with some of our financial matters. I don't know how many of them have a background in psych or soc to really determine the effectiveness of these programs. Aside from that, the heads of our departments and divisions over in human services spend countless time, day in and day out, meeting with folks from the state, meeting with folks from the feds, meeting internally to review the effectiveness of these programs. They have the information and they will present it when requested. I don't think an amendment is necessary. Thank you.
I have no other lights. On the amendment, roll call. If you're in favor of Supervisor Decker's amendment to provide some accountability and reporting on the programs of the Human Services, P and plus. If you're opposed, P and minus. 23-4, motion fails. Now that that's been disposed of, I'm going to make a quick comment on that issue. This did come up at the last budget. During the discussion and the debate of the budget, there was a debate of the budget, not necessarily on the county board floor. There was conversation with the county, with the administration, as well as those in the Human Services Department. I've heard a couple of people talk about the Human Services budget being a behemoth, and we shouldn't micromanage a behemoth. We had a discussion about psycho and sociological issues that we shouldn't concern ourselves with here on the county board floor. We were talking about $80+ million. Is that correct? Can I see a nod of a head? Somebody in the ballpark? This county board should very well engage themselves in $80 million worth of expenditures. I'm not suggesting you micromanage, but I am suggesting that benchmarks, outcomes, and evaluations ought to be provided, and ought to be provided in a timely manner, and ought to be looked at, and we should make some determinations collectively as to whether or not the programs we pay a significant amount of money for are, in fact, appropriate. Continuous improvement is what you should be shooting for. Am I questioning the information we get, or suggesting that it's somehow skewed? We can argue that all day long, but it should be looked at, and we should take it seriously, and I trust that starting Wednesday was the date that we will take it seriously and we'll begin to look at it. And I'm going to implore you not to rely solely. This is as much a criticism as it is constructive as it is negative. Don't rely solely on the consultant who provides the service for your answer. I'm really good at selling architectural services, and I'll pitch all day long why it's a great deal, and you can't do anything without me. I'm sure Supervisor Clark can do it in the financial world and the accounting world. I'm sure some of the attorneys in the room would do a great job at that. It is a behemoth, which is exactly why we should be looking at it. I have a great deal of confidence in Mr. Jansen, Ms. Staves, and everyone else who's going to bring the information forward. We need to do our job here in the county board and scrutinize that budget. I've asked for it for a couple of years now. It's time we get it. It's time we do it. Simple as that. Supervisor O'Day?
Chairman, with all due respect to your earlier comments when we started the meeting, am I able now to call the question on the budget?
You know, I got to tell you in all honesty, that really frosts me. And, you know, I recognize this is a serious matter. I try to lighten things up a little bit without being disrespectful to the process, but to close debate is simply something that I don't support and never have when you're talking about $200 million that you're going to throw at the taxpayer. If that's your will, the motion before you is a motion to close debate, moved by Supervisor O'Day, seconded by Supervisor Rose. Non-debatable on the issue. If you're in favor, P and plus. If you're opposed, P and minus. For the record, there were additional lights on the board. Not many, but there were some on. No, let's do 30. Thank you. Debate is still open. On the issue, Supervisor Bruning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no amendments to make. I just want to make that clear. I do, however, want to speak briefly about planning and development and what has been happening to their department. Last year, the county budget removed 3 positions from their budget. This year, they have come through and removed 4 more positions from their budget. They are now down to 11 personnel in their office. While I understand that the economy is down, there is no building going on, we all understand this, I do want to caution everyone one more time, and for those that were not at the Finance Committee meetings, that the West End is prime for building. If you don't get out there, and if you live in the city, you probably don't understand this. The village of Bristol, now that they're a village, is not prepared to do any planning. They don't have a planning department out there. They have always relied on the county to do that for them. They've now become a village. If planning takes off, they have no way to do this. They will come looking to the county for this. While everyone thinks that you can just go out and hire people to do this, you can't do that. These people will be long gone, and to have someone come in and understand the smart growth plans that we have put in place and to be ready to hit the ground running and do this development out there, you are mistaken. This is not going to happen overnight, but the development will. We have already had people in Salem developers asking about different properties. They are getting ready. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I just want to caution everyone, if you keep coming after this department, there's going to be a lot of problems and cause major issues for Kenosha County. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Gingerman. Seeing no lights. Before you is the budget as amended. The amendment is, the only amendment that has passed is the overtime amendment. Do I need to repeat it, or are we clear? Roll call on the budget as amended. P and plus if you're in favor, P and minus if you're opposed. Motion carries 25-2. All right. The next order of business, based on the emergency meeting notice that was sent out, is to go into closed session with relative to the redistricting. So I'm going to entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section. I need you to stay with me for 1 minute, please, and then we'll clear the chamber with a quick recess. Pursuant to section 1985-1G of the Wisconsin statute. So moved by Supervisor Decker, seconded by Supervisor Arrington. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? We're in closed session. We'll give a quick 5-minute recess to clear the room and for the chairman to see a man about a horse. The closed session should have been a roll call, and I jumped the gun on that, so we're going to have to go back and revisit the move. I'm sorry, the move into closed session. But before we do it, I also failed to recognize Supervisor Esposito prior to the vote on the budget. And I'm going to ask the board to, I don't know what I did with that statement you gave me, to indulge the fact that Supervisor Esposito wants to be on the record as abstaining from the portion of the budget that addresses the non-rep pay plan. He ran that by Corporation Counsel. That was Corporation Counsel's recommendation. So unless there's objection, I will note that for the record. Thank you. Now, at this point, again, I will entertain from Supervisor Decker, seconded by Supervisor Arrington, to go into closed session to confer with legal counsel per section 1985-1G of the Wisconsin statutes. On that, we need a roll call vote. P plus if you're in favor, P minus if you're opposed. (27-0). We are in closed session. Record will show that only attendants are only supervisors, Corporation Counsel, Mr. Brockmeyer from the Land Information Office, the clerk, and the deputy clerk. Is that right, deputy clerk? And the other clerk, other deputy clerk, assistant clerk, Reggie. All right. Those opposed, motion carries. I want to thank all of you for the debate this evening on the budget. Well done. Motion adjourned by Supervisor O'Day, seconded by Supervisor Clark. All those in favor signify by saying aye. We are adjourned.